2026 for the second time. Earlier, I was working on a bit of an infographic for the whiteboard about news cycles and accumulated fake news and its effect on mass perception. Phones are open if you want to call in and comment on anything. Must be a slow weekend. I see Dolly's braces coming back into the conversation. When people start reaching for like Mandela effects, I'm sorry, but that's bottom of the barrel. If we're talking about Mandela effects, there's literally nothing going on in anybody's lives. And I think that's why they like it. I think a lot of conspiracy theories are just novelty, conspiratainment. Everything is so tabloid, as we've been discussing. So let me go ahead and pull up comments. And then we'll go through my Twitter feed. Okay, here we are. I put a link to my Twitter, by the way, at the very top. So if you want to follow along with what I'm referencing, go over to Twitter. What's up, Duet? Thank you for joining. Yeah, okay, let's just talk about Dolly's braces really quick. A couple of things. The theory that her braces were removed is based on a something of a common misconception. And I think it's closer to, like, if you really get down to it, it's more akin to a misheard song lyric than anything else. Anything as far as like conspiracy, or rather simulation theory. I think we've more than debunked it, to be honest. I think we've totally deconstructed the Mandela effect and how it works. I'm trying to work with my system here. I'm trying to put the background image of the tank. But anyway, I've come to understand here that there's a process by which people will start to claim something as a belief, as opposed to, here we go, recognizing it might be a mental fabrication, a confabulation. We are easily prompted, I think, into constructing false perceptions. And then these can be recalled in the wrong context, and it actually influences your recollection. So it doesn't mean that people are lying. It means that they've mistaken what they've been prompted to imagine based on a misconception with an actual memory. But the thing is, the discussion about Dolly's braces was a thing in the 90s. You can find some threads from film critics on the matter. So given that, the Mandela effect didn't happen until 2012. And then moreover, there were discrepancies about whether or not she had braces immediately after it was released, because some film reviewers threw in some comments about it. Some said it should have had braces. Some thought it did. My point of it is, if it was indeed a reality-shifting Mandela effect, it wouldn't have manifested day one. That's not how these things work. So it doesn't even fit the template of something that could be submitted as a canonical Mandela effect. Like if Mandela effect was a church, like the Pope, they have to approve miracles. It doesn't pass. It's a misconception at best. It is in no way indicative of reality shifting. You can just rule that out. Moreover, if you saw it on the VHS, you're lying, because the theory is that it would have changed before it made it to the VHS. That's what the prevailing theory was that maybe they deleted the braces because she looked too young, inappropriately young. Well, the actress says she's never had them, and there's no discrepancy in any of the other scenes with her. So I think it's just kind of dead as a possibility for being a Mandela effect. And it's proof, though, and this is the ego barrier. People have to be able to admit that they're wrong, or that their memory's not infallible, or they may have been misled. And it's not easy for people to let these things go. But I think it's useful to understand how it works, because if you can fall for this, it means that you're susceptible to interrogator bias and to having your memories screwed with. And this isn't to say you can't trust your memories, but you have to be aware of how interrogators, or the way a question is framed, can influence your recollection, and how it is, in fact, malleable. This is why I won't take videos or photos of dead loved ones and put them in AI so they move around and stuff, because I don't want to contaminate those memories. You know, every time you bring them up, you're going to depreciate it in some way, possibly, depending on where you are. So if you value certain memories, you really don't want to mess with them. All right, let's see here. King Orvana says, Cuban Iranians aren't on the phones. Unbelievable. Well, the phones are open. And I'll have an 800 number here in a few days. Flozik says, I like your recent post. Yeah, so the mind mapping stuff is crucial to explaining the Truman Show, the internalized Truman Show that we live within. This whole process of deprogramming, it's a one-way thing, but you have to grasp it first. But once you do, there's no other place for you but the off-world stage perspective, to be informed rather than misinformed. And there's no middle ground. Like, if you're not paying attention to the news, you're under misinformed. It doesn't mean you're informed. In fact, you're, I think, in a more worse off, vulnerable position with no situational awareness. You're better off knowing how the game works. And we can show you. And you can exit. What's up, Piano? Otto Hoax says Jim Carrey was played by... Jim Carrey is probably having some kind of a meltdown. How is he taking this? Because I don't think that there's any plausibility to any of these theories about him. I think it comes off as almost ageist, unrealistic expectations. But if he was sensitive about his appearance, insecure, and had these upgrades, and then he has this reaction, it might be a lot to take on. So I'm just saying, leave Jim alone for the time being. Now, if he shows up again and doesn't, and people have the same opinion, yeah, then maybe, call the cops, report him as a missing person. Has anybody done that? Has anybody reported him as a missing person? Because if you really care about somebody and you think they've been murdered by the Illuminati and replaced by a body double, you should be calling the cops. That's a legal matter. That's a law enforcement matter. And that's why I think a lot of these claims, in addition to being irrational, are unserious. King Ravana says, I saw Anne Hesh move around outside the car. Right, now, do you believe that was a real accident? Because it's one of two things. It could be a few things, actually. The Anne Hesh thing was interesting. The helicopter's going over and she's being wheeled into the back of an ambulance and she sits up. And I was told that's consistent with someone responding to being burned, and she's in a burn blanket. It also looks like maybe she was popping out of her role prematurely. It could have been manufactured to create the perception that she was going to release some damaging stuff, so they took her out. And the firemen were all there to collaborate with the Illuminati, a bunch of henchmen. I don't know. But I don't believe that she was actually killed there. I kind of think it looked fake. I just don't know if her sitting up was intentional or not. Were we supposed to see that? What's up, Green Smoke? Thanks for joining. Now, again, the reason for bringing up the Mandela effect is that it's actually a rebranded thing. It's called the misinformation effect. And this is real. And they're using it on us. It's one of their strategies. It's one of their tactics, which is, in order to fill someone's memories up regarding a certain event, you have to give them a lot of extraneous information, constant remixes, constantly bringing it up again. So it's like they drill it in. And the things that they drilled in with, the repeated images, sound bites, etc., that pretty much gets lumped in with memories. And people do, in fact, recall things they don't have any business recalling. Like, people will say, I was watching 9/11 jumpers on 9/11. Well, no, you weren't. or I saw it on 9/11 on TV. Well, I don't know if you saw it live. The jumpers weren't really there until the second day or third day, so you didn't see them on day one. And this is not an uncommon thing. Conan O'Brien saying his parents woken up to watch the moon landing and to see the astronauts land alive. That didn't happen. And Buzz Aldrin had to correct him. It's like, no, there was no cameraman on the moon to record us landing. That was an animation they showed you. And now this is another one. And I don't know why people are still saying this, but people are saying, oh, the Indian moon landing was super fake. And nobody's called it out. No, it wasn't. The animation they show you is not meant to be the thing landing on the moon. There's no camera crew there. When they show you an animation of something landing on the moon, it's a real-time animated simulation, so you know where the thing is in relation to the lunar surface. So you're not actually supposed to mistake that for being representative of the actual capsule. So there's a misconception that the animation was meant to be taken to be the real thing. And no, that's not what it was. They do this all the time. And again, it's because they don't have a camera crew on the moon. So there's that. One other point here. People misremember song lyrics, mishear song lyrics all the time. And this is never considered to be evidence of reality shifting. So how do you explain that? How do you explain misconceptions where hundreds of millions of people misremember something, or how people misspell things? Well, popular misconceptions are rather common. And this specific subset of popular misconceptions have been branded as Mandela effects. And it's a very selective group, and each one is the result of a binary. Version A, version B. There's never a version C, D, E, F, G. Why is that? It's because that's not how this mind game works. If they're trying to lead you to this other conclusion, and they don't know they're doing it, but this is what the misinformation effect does. This is how interrogator bias works. You frame a question in a certain way to lead them to the answer you want them to go with. And these memories are super shallow. They used to say, everybody knows Timmy fell down the well, and nobody can actually explain how they got him out. And it's because the memory is just a facade of a memory. It's not real. What's up, Pippi Langstroth? Thank you for joining. All right, let's go ahead. So anyway, I'm moving on from the Mandela effect. I'm just saying it reared its head, and I'm going to have to address it in detail, but it's still very popular, which is also a red flag. That in itself is a red flag. That it's super popular. Oh, by the way, the new season of The Boys is coming out, and this is the one where the character, the Homelander, represents Trump. And they changed the title of the season finale because it was called Assassination Run, and it was about assassinating him, and it came out about the time of the Trump shooting in Butler. Well, the new season's just been promoted by a trailer, and in the trailer, there's a song where it has the lyrics, "Till the Day I Die," and it zooms in on the Homelander, who's Trump, and he's in the Oval Office. So Trump, Oval Office, Till the Day I Die, a series that has already contained predictive programming, might mean something. And there's a spin-off show called Gen V, and season 2, episode 4, I believe. It might be 4-2 or 2-4, one of those two. It has a goat named Elon that is levitated by a psychic and then blown up, which makes me wonder if maybe he gets in one of his own rockets and doesn't come down in one piece. Pippi says, Lassie had bracelets. Lassie had bracelets. I don't know. I kind of remembered braces, to be honest. Now, again, there's no valid Mandela effects, but you need to understand how it works, because once you do, you won't fall for it. It's really clever, to be honest. But the other side of it, which makes it sort of bad, is that the reason it works is the person who's the target of it is actually being gaslit. Like, question your perceptions, doubt your recollections. Do you really know? Is reality objective? And I think this is mind war, because what it does is all these people who fall for this are the same people who are known for calling news fake, conspiracy theorists. So you have these people who are accurately describing fake news, but now they're like, oh, reality's fake. So which is it? Is reality fake or is the news fake? Can news be fake if reality's not even real? So if you don't have an objective viewpoint, nothing you say has any real validity with regard to media criticism. And that's why I think the off-world stage perspective needs to be widely adopted. Lean Dion says it was always Ryan Ravely in my reality. Well, he might have figured it out. One of the biggest Mandela effect pushers, one day, he was no longer a Mandela guy. Now he's a real estate magnate. And he makes videos about it. So he's moved into a different timeline. He went from starving YouTube content creator, Mandela affecting people for donos. People were paying to be brainwashed and gaslit, but it wasn't enough. And now he's a real estate magnate. He's going to be the next Donald Trump. Who knows what he's going to do? I mean, if you can just skip realities, why limit yourself? It also, I think, exposes this blind spot many people have when it comes to memory and trusting people's memories. Because people will swear by their memories, and attacking their memories like insulting. Like, are you saying my memory's not perfect? Yeah. And they use that to kind of intimidate you out of questioning it. So it becomes an appeal to authority. By the authority of my memory, my perfect recollection, I'm swearing that this is true. Well, you don't have to trust somebody's memory. You can call it into question. It's perfectly fair. It's also fair to call people liars when they lie about knowing somebody who knows somebody whose BFF's cousin's dog walker's girlfriend died at this event. Because people will do this. They'll say, hey, I know somebody that's 6 degrees separated from that event, so it's real. Okay, well, that doesn't count. And you're lying. And not only are you lying, but if you're trying to maintain the integrity of an official PSYOP, you're like a crisis actor, but worse, because you're not even getting paid. You're just a volunteer reinforcer of the NPC mind control program. Like, why? Who does this? If you have a conscience and you're aware of it, at a minimum, you step outside of it and maybe warn some of your friends, hey, you might want to look at this. Looks like we're being hacked, that we're mentally hacked. I mean, wouldn't you want to know if movies contain subliminal programming? Yeah, obviously. It's called situational awareness. You want to be aware of threats or potential threats. So why wouldn't you want people to be aware of the program itself? Not that I'm proselytizing or advocating such, but I'm just saying the people who are pushing back against us are inexplicably misguided. Like, if you're going to be against anybody's alternate opinions, go after truthers. Off-world stagers are the only ones with an objective viewpoint. And if you're opposing this, I just don't know where you're coming from. Unless you're getting paid as disinfo, sabotage, or something. All right, let's continue. The demon stuff's out of control. I think we've all. I have demonic AI fatigue, Allah Akbar fatigue, Epstein fatigue, Jim Carrey fatigue. Like, all of it's getting really that's why the Mandela effect probably came on. Okay, AI is ushering in a new era of Satanism. Exorcists warn. How much do they charge for an exorcism? But this is where we're at. I think this is just a great indication that we're at this point where the public is being openly encouraged to adopt superstitions. I would consider aliens to be a superstition, but because it looks like sci-fi, people think it's a scientifically defensible proposition. And I think they're encouraging superstition, escapism, and conspiracy theories in general. I think they want this right now because of whatever they're preparing to do. Now, is it going to be an alien invasion, AI takeover, some paradigm shift, another maybe a lockdown, nuke plus fallout? I think that's plausible. But whatever it is, they seem to be setting the stage. Stephen Greer calls the aliens are demons narrative stupid and says it's a psyop to convince the public that an alien Armageddon is coming. Yeah, so it's an alien rapture thing, and Stephen Greer is pushing back against it, which is kind of interesting. It's like kettle and pot. So he's saying, don't believe the aliens are demons, and the people are like, these are demons, not aliens. Both of them are promulgating analogous superstitions. So I don't know if he's just trying to defend his grift, but there was a definitive schism here. And I plotted this schism out a long time ago. I noted that the right had this certain attitude that was being pushed by its big influencers, like MTG, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones even. And the idea that the aliens are in fact a mask for demons. It's not necessarily new, but it's partisan. And it goes along with the attitude towards AI, which the right-wing conspiracy theorist subset all seem to think is HAL 9000 or Skynet. They're about to unleash the Terminators. Okay, let's see. Brian Johnson says, theater is a requirement for PSYOP implementation, a natural reaction to the loss of humanity's alpha sentience, never actually existed. Okay, theater as a requirement for PSYOP implementation. I use the phrase theater of PSYWAR because we're looking at something that is performed, and it's not too dissimilar from a reality TV show, which makes sense. Erica Kirk, Donald Trump, Candace Owens, Donald Trump, Erica Kirk in particular were reality TV show stars. So a crisis actor is doing reality TV. A mass casualty simulation actor in the capacity of, a victim or law enforcement, whatever role they're playing, it's reality TV. It's like LARPing, but it's theater. And theater is a weapon or the main tool of this psychological warfare. It's all done through theater. And these are myths, contemporary myths that are created, and our engagement with them makes these things, in fact, like an alternate reality game. So we're co-creating these fake events with our belief. Specifically, the mainstream and alternative people who automatically believe these things, they're co-creating and signing off on manufactured historic events. And the more emotional people are about it, the more ingrained these beliefs become. So we have to recognize, though, that these are beliefs. They don't know these things to be true. Your average truther who's flipping out about, Israel or Charlie Kirk or even, the weather modification, whatever it happens to be, Epstein, these people do not know these things to be true. These are beliefs that they have. And these beliefs are the substance of the sublimated civil war, the mind war itself. It's just these belief systems competing, but they don't translate into reality. They're not real in any meaningful sense, but they populate the internalized Truman Show. And so we're watching this rollout of fake events and people engaging with it essentially in their heads. And this explains why there's no commensurate action. There's no mass movements. There's no people protesting in any meaningful way any of these conspiracy theories, whether like Epstein Island. You think that there'd be protests? Where is it? Where are the activists on the right? They don't have it because the X, the phone, the social media, It allows them to blow off steam. It's a steam valve, like voting. Voting, emoting on the internet, these things give you the illusion of power, and it acts as a catharsis. So you're feeding loosh into the system as a loosh cow, into your black monolith, altar to Saturn. You're feeding your life energy into this thing. And that's all you need to do. You feel like, okay, I've done my part. I've emoted. I've raised awareness. Well, you basically helped co-create that fake event. So now it exists as a permanent fixture of the consensus worldview. So I'm no longer co-signing any fake event. I'm not a participant in any psyop. I'm not treating any of these actors as real people. I'm not building the mental cage anymore. I'm just criticizing it from the outside. And if you're not outside of it, if you can't see it and separate it from the real thing, by default, you're building it. If you're a passive news consumer and you're feeding off of the establishment media troughs, mainstream or alternative, you're building their fake history that you're living in. It's like pyramid duty. You're building the pyramids for the pharaoh. You're essentially doing that. You're building what they create, and it's now part of your worldview, gives you a frame of reference, makes you controllable. Like Frank Herbert, Dune Messiah, they're not mad, they're trained to believe, because belief can be manipulated. They're trained to believe, not to know, because belief can be manipulated and knowledge is dangerous. Lean Dion says, Candace is still pushing Charlie could have been a time traveler that had to be taken out. These agents are brain damaging their listeners. She even said that she and Charlie went to gifted schools where they got tested, and he would run and lights would turn off above his head. So she's supposedly from some school of the gifted. I mean, like it's like Marvel Comics stuff. I mean, I wonder who's writing her content, or if she's on if she's on something. I mean, she did write this article in the past about how to get Adderall from any doctor, so that could be part of it. But I'm listening to a lot of her word salady breakdowns of conspiracy theories we talk about, and it sounds to me like she's just adding noise. In fact, and I'm kind of loath to read this, but Andrew Tate said something about how people are observing something they can't change. It's all essentially theater. And if I can find it, I'll read it. But it almost sounds like something we're talking about, but it doesn't go far enough. So I do see these attempts of people to try to frame everything that we're seeing as scripted or theater, but they can't go too far with it. They keep it kind of vague, and it still kind of leans into simulation nonsense. King Ravana says there would be way more Terminator detecting dogs if Skynet was around your corner. Oh, well, okay, Skynet is Terminator 2. It's the mass AI system that takes over the world or something. Skynet's a James Cameron thing, and James Cameron later did Pandora, and the story of Pandora is that it's sentient. The Earth, Gaia, is sentient. So it's all about this idea of global consciousness. And one of the things about the alien invasion is it represents a higher intelligence coming down, taking over, and now we're united as one, global consciousness. And I think that's kind of what AI is meant to do. Skynet. They're going to Skynet us. And they're doing it incrementally. And we're probably going to beg for it. You know, like 1984 was a nightmare scenario. Everybody surveilled, no privacy whatsoever. Well, where do you see privacy today? People download the contents of their mind or upload the contents of their mind into social media. So social media is essentially a mind reading device. Every interaction makes you more predictable. And there's no perceived value in privacy. If you have value, you put it on the internet. You become a product. But anyway, robot, the killer robots, the Terminators, 99% of the videos that you see, like in China, you have these robots with machine guns and stuff, of Boston Dynamics. Usually those are AI. And that's kind of how the alien invasion could work. Very few people check to see if it's real or not before they share it. And I don't know if this is simply a loss of discernment or a desire to be entertained and just approaching media as simply, infotainment. So Leonard DeJuda says facts. Yeah, which are illegal. Well, I mean, facts are legal, but as long as your perspective is within their closed informational system, they don't make a difference. You cannot arrive at the truth even if you have a fact. I saw some security guard. This guy was sort of a security detail for dignitaries and politicians. And in his experience, he said, you would never see the target of an assassination get up and pose for the cameras after getting shot, like Trump did. And he said he didn't believe it was real. He said there's no way Trump actually got shot. That was some kind of blood packet, and it was political theater. So he got that right. That's a fact. But then he said, but they did kill the shooter, so they must have just found some undesirable that they didn't feel bad about killing. So now this guy's positing that Trump faked it, but was willing to sacrifice some rando. And then he said the fireman died. And his explanation there was he wasn't meant to shoot anybody. So they come up with conspiracy theories to explain the discrepancy. So now the fact that Trump faked an ear wound from an AR-15 has been obfuscated by additional conspiracy conjecture. That's an operating system. Their operating system is basically add on until it makes sense. And I'm like, no, you don't add, you subtract. Yeah, Spotless Leopard, that's a good one. Erica Kirk, Madam X, into YouTube. I have a book, an ebook on Erica and Charlie and the squib and putting it into the bigger context because nobody has it right. Even the people who are guessing that Charlie might have faked it, they can't really wrap their heads around the magnitude of the event itself, who it would involve, how extensive a conspiracy it actually is. But I'm going to offer clarification. And what we're talking about here is that Erica and Charlie were not real people. They were actors, embedded plants, playing roles that took 13 years to reach its fruition that they knew in advance was going to happen. That assassination we witnessed was planned at least 30 years prior. I mean, I'm saying 30 years with relative certainty, and I'll explain why in this book. So knowing that these are manufactured characters, you can kind of see how they construct them, these constructs. Like Elon Musk is a construct. He's part Tony Stark, Werner von Braun, Willy Wonka, Jack Parsons, mixed in with a few other elements. And so Erica Kirk obviously has this pre-existing template, Madam X, which ties into this whole thing in a lot of ways. So if you didn't know, there's just a lot of parallels between this widow. This was a wife of a Florida governor. And there's Florida, the Trump connections. There's a lot there, a lot of code. The word Kirk means church, which has some significance here as well. And as things have rolled forward, as the conspiracy theories have brought the Moonies into it and South Korea into it, where Charlie was 4 days before, it even more makes sense that The Tempest was filmed in South Korea. And if you haven't seen The Tempest, it's about the leader of a youth Republican organization in a church getting shot on the left side of the neck and bleeding out in front of everybody. Then his wife, the widow, takes over. And in order to take over, she has to fake like she's crying on stage. And she gets called out for faking her grief. And then later, she gets called out for possibly even having orchestrated the assassination because her intention was to take over the youth Republicans from the very beginning. So the Erica Kirk character arc, from grieving widow to conspiring Jezebel witch villain, is in The Tempest that came out on the day Charlie was shot and features the opening scene where the main character gets shot in the neck in a church. The character, by the way, has Trump's birthday, which is just something to note. But I'm doing a thorough breakdown with this ebook, which I'll translate into video, because I've been observing all the different channels, especially the big channels like Jesse on Fire, 600,000 subs, talking about Charlie might have faked it and still getting it wrong. And the reason why they're getting it wrong is you can't get it right if your perspective is in the closed system. You're not open-minded in your approach to media if you do not include in your assessment media fakery, the systemic fakery going back decades. If that's not part of your assessment, if you've excluded that information, you're operating within a closed system. It's not open-minded, it's not open inquiry, and it's impossible to arrive at the correct conclusion because now your base assumption is he's dead. If it is not in the realm of possibilities that it could have been faked, then you're starting off wrong because it is 100% fakeable. And fakeable is a very important concept here, and it's not part of the operating system people have when it comes to approaching media. And even those who call out psyops and fake events, they're understating the significance of it. We're not just talking about psyops or hoaxes, which are like PR stunts that affect a present news cycle. We're talking about the fabrication of historically significant events that become fixtures in the consensus worldview forever. These are permanent changes to our history. So our history is fake, which means that we are standing upon an edifice of fakery. Our perspective of media is framed by the tacit acceptance of all this fake stuff as though it were real. So we are fundamentally confused as a society. And the only unconfused out there would be the perps, the operators behind this thing, and those of us who have managed to figure out enough to ascertain what's actually going on. So these are not anomalous events. The fact that the Charlie Kirk thing was scheduled decades prior is actually standard. And this explains quite a lot. It explains long-term psychological operations like the Epstein thing. You know, that whole thing was essentially a LARP, an act played out over email and constructed over. These are constructed mythologies. We're surrounded by Mirage Men. If you haven't seen Mirage Men, I think it's necessary to understand why people believe in aliens. And it's not something that is scientific or the result of rigorous research and observations. It's purely superstition. Listen to this stuff. The Astral says, and I don't know why, I'm being fed this stuff. The Algo is feeding me. It went from ICE and ICE protests to aliens and demons and exorcists. Ross Coulthart shares new details about a portal and witnesses saying people walk through walls and warns against anybody visiting these locations or they will be killed. So where are these portals and what the hell is a portal? There's a few comments here. Ancient ruins cover portals. Bradshaw Ranch, Sedona, Red Rock, Arizona. Specifically fenced archaeological zones in the Cleveland National Forest. Portal hotspots. So I never heard of portals. I was hearing about orbs. So the January 2025, a little over a year ago, there were these drone sightings all over New Jersey. Everybody in New Jersey was calling 911 because Chinese drones. Turns out these were all airplanes, but not all. I mean, Mick West had actually found that if you take the metadata, you could determine if that particular light at that time was a spaceship from Mars or an airplane. And he was able to cross-reference with flight tracking and find out these were all airplanes. There were no Chinese drones. It was a panic. But some people were actually recording the planet Venus. And what the hell was that? And there was one lady who was talking to Venus and telling them about Jesus. And she thought it was a UFO, and she was telepathically. So anyway, this place is insane. And it's, at first I was like, this is disappointing what they've done, dragging us back into some dark age. But now I see it as an opportunity, because not everybody is susceptible to this stuff, but it's being given a pass for a reason. It's metastasizing. And the reason why it matters is this: if only 10% of us have a clear perspective and the 90% will believe anything, the programmers can implement something that the 99% will believe, and the minority of non-believers don't even matter, as it is right now. The limiting factor as to what they can pull off in the realm of psychological operations is public credulity. And if they're willing to believe anything, they will be able to do anything. Eric Weinstein and Eric Davis break down interdimensional beings and why this should concern everyone. Davis thinks they picked it up from classified briefings on crash retrieval programs. Someone else says, what if the intelligence behind these UFOs operates across multiple dimensions? It's incredibly concerning when you're doing a threat assessment on something. And this is basically saying that we should be concerned about interdimensional aliens and craft. Erica Kirk's deconstruction is an ongoing psyop. This is something else to consider too. All the stuff they're uncovering about her past that makes her seem fake, and I'm seeing big channels say this now. Like, so Milo Yiannopoulos is a big woke right person. He used to be with Breitbart, and he was really big at the beginning of Donald Trump's campaign with the alt-right crowd. Well, he's called out Erica Kirk. He's like, is anything about her not fake? But what they're pointing out is the planted narrative to create the perception she was a deceiver of Charlie Kirk and Charlie Kirk is dead. Any conspiracy theory that begins with the premise that Charlie is dead is noise. This is just noise. Because it's not about, was she dishonest and did she trick him? No, that's her character's role. And she created content over the 13 years they were from 2012. I think it's probably about the time TPUSA started. But anyway, the years leading up to her interaction with Charlie, they were creating this content so they could expose her as a Jezebel later. This is obviously scripted. And the reason why this falls flat, this doesn't work, is that it implies that Charlie wasn't also fake. That Candace Owens is real. Candace Owens is as fake as Erica Kirk. And one of my favorite things about this Erica Kirk thing, and I called this the Erica Kirk conundrum, is those people who still say, hey, the connections between the Tempest, Heads of State, Snake Eyes, and Erica Kirk are merely coincidence. Okay, well, everything she's done since she came on to the world stage has aligned with these characterizations of her in entertainment, specifically the Tempest, most notably the Tempest, but all of them. So given that, the coincidence theorists can't explain the way that she's still walking in the steps of these characters. She's an ongoing crisis actress. See, normally you have these psyop actors for a day, a couple days, and they go away. The longer she stays in character, the more obvious it is. This is intentional. This is planned. She's a reality TV starlet on the world stage. And the implications here, when you get into it, and I'll have this in my ebook and video, is that if Charlie was squibbed, who would know? Well, she would have known. So she's in on it being fake. Sync Kid says, it's interesting that movies misquote other films, like Tommy Boy misquoting Star Wars could be part of the media brainwashing experiment. No, I've looked into that. Okay, Luke, I am your father, doesn't make sense in the context of the movie. If you go back to Star Wars and they're having a conversation, he might have said Luke at the beginning, but he wouldn't be saying Luke at the beginning of every sentence. When you talk to your friends, do you say their name every time you start a sentence? No, you don't. you maybe say their name at the beginning, if then. So it would have been inconsistent for Darth to have said, Luke, blah, 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 Luke, I'm your father. He said, look, I'm your father. Or I'm your father. He may not have said anything. It wouldn't have been necessary. However, if you're going to do an impersonation of the scene, being funny, you would have to say Luke or the person you're saying it to. She's talking about Tommy Boy. So in Tommy Boy, Chris Farley is speaking through a fan, and he sounds like Darth Vader. And he's telling his cousin, Luke, I'm your father. If he said, I'm your father, it would make no sense. But if he says, Luke, I'm your father, it establishes that he's pretending to be Darth. The only way you can indicate you're being Darth Vader is if you cast the other person as Luke. So for the structure of the joke, it wouldn't make sense for him to have not said Luke. So that's not a misquote necessarily. It's a necessary rephrasing of it. But it's not an indication of the intentional creation of Mandela effects. The Mandela effect, people think this is engineered or intentional. No, these things are manufactured. This is the misinformation effect. I could create Mandela effects right now if I was cynical and manipulative and thought there was a good opportunity in it, perhaps, and whatever. If I had an incentive, I would make up Mandela effects. I've done some experiments, actually. I've done some. And people will fall for it. All right, moving on. Exclusive report, is Jared Kushner the Antichrist? This is like stale, 10-year-old breaking news. So Jared Kushner bought one of the most expensive buildings in New York, 666 Fifth Avenue. And because of his role in the Middle East and he wants to build up Gaza, etc., they're now saying he's the Antichrist. The Antichrist is a Hollywood myth, a creation. It's a religious psyop. And if you believe in the Antichrist, what is your basis? You can't really say it's the Bible in that sense. But this is a strange twist because a few years ago, the talk among Q Street people was that JFK is the Antichrist. And that the Antichrist is actually the good guy, and the bad guys altered the Bible so we would reject him. So they said that JFK was the second coming of Christ, and the Bible calls him the Antichrist, but he's actually the good guy. So it's really hard to determine, what is the consensus belief that they have, because it's always fluctuating. But the Antichrist of the week is Jared Kushner. Cardi B's implants coming out on stage. I don't know if this is relevant to anything. She's been in my feed for a few days. She was like dancing with a robot and it fell on top of her. And then she fell off a chair. She blamed the government. I'm not really sure. I don't really follow these things, but I know how they're constantly hitting my feed. Frazzle Drip enters official record in Senate hearing. You know how many people claim that they saw Frazzle Drip? And this is another PSYOP tactic where, and I've seen this since Hunter Biden's laptop, and it became big with Q, where people would say, oh, these videos are real, the Epstein files are real, but my buddy who's a cop saw it, and he woke up in the middle of the night with nightmares, and he threw up, and it's so horrible he can't sleep, he's got PTSD. So they try to sell you on the idea that it's so bad you don't want to look, so just take my word for it, trust me, bro. 33 NDB says it's obvious that everything is fake. I don't know why people can't see it. It's not obvious. If it was obvious, people would see it. It's not obvious. And we have to get away from that kind of framing. Like someone had said, oh, it's obvious Trump wasn't really shot. Was it? You could not show that video to a crowd of people and point to any frame and say, look, it's obviously fake. It becomes an appeal from personal incredulity, establishing yourself as some arbiter of what's real and not. You can't substantiate the claim that it's obviously fake. If you're going to say it's fake, you have to go to prove it. And oftentimes, you can't, just solely relying on the video presentation. And you cannot expect it to be the case moving into the future that there will be consistent glitches to give away the fakery that you can point out as obvious. So no, it's not obvious. The reason why people can't see it is because it's a magic show. If you're in a magic show, you're sitting in the seats, you're looking at the stage, you can't say it's obviously fake because these things are tricking you. The illusions are fooling you. Unless you can reverse engineer that magic trick and tell everybody how it was done, you can't say, oh, it's obviously a fake trick. No, it's not. It's not obvious. In fact, it's pretty much foolproof. The only way you can see through the magic trick is to go backstage, to get out of your seat, meaning have more perspective than directly facing the screen, directly facing the magician and what he points to. So the reason why everyone can't see it is because it's not obvious and it's not possible to visually see through it. You have to have a wider understanding of the media ecosystem and what it really is, and how there are no meaningful distinctions between government, entertainment, and what we're seeing on the news is a presentation meant to conform you to a pre-existing worldview. It's not there to inform you. Okay, let me go through my comments. Critical thinker seems to think, interesting. I'm not going to go through this, but you know, these people who put two faces side by side, like Sean Connery also played. This is an interesting one. I'll see if I can find a better picture. But person A is person B. It's not an uncommon proposition, but I think I figured out how it worked. I think it's sort of a Mandela effect type thing. And it, again, like this Jim Carrey thing, I think there's a lot of confusion out there. And I think there are people who capitalize on how confusable we are. But I think one of our blind spots is it's not hard to imagine person A portraying person B. It's sort of like how we perceive animation as a continuous drawing, not multiple images played back to back. I mean, I still think Rush Limbaugh was probably Jim Morrison. That one has a lot of narrative substance. Do I think Alex Jones was Bill Hicks? There's a good story, and there's a framework. There's the common producer. So there's more substance to it than not. So person A being person B, I don't think you can rely solely on the picture, is my point. There has to be a narrative framework. If you're going to say some event is fake, you can't just point to the video. You should be able to actually describe the context in which it was released, the agendas that it pushed forward, the other hoax indicators. Travis says, do you like your chances of being able to get past the archons? I already have. You know, I think you can transcend the archonic control grid through gnosis, through knowledge. Like, so I consider even this media deconstruction is just, I think, another aspect of my general Gnosticism. Because before I even looked at fake news, I had already had this sudden, it wasn't sudden, I mean, there was a number of things that led to it, but I had this very strong, direct, intuitive understanding all of a sudden of how it were possible that the multitudes, that the populations have all been put into a mental construct. And I started to see that this is just one aspect of what is the material prison for the soul sparks. So not only are we spirit stuck in matter, but mentally we're put into an illusion. So there's a double layer to this prison. And once that hit me, I started watching the news, and all at once, I'm like, holy crap, can't trust the space program. Flat or not, the Earth is being misrepresented. All these shootings are fake. This is psychological warfare. And it hit me over the course of like 24 hours that news media was not, in fact, informing us, but it was conforming us to something. And I hadn't arrived at a full conclusion, but I recognized enough to know that I'm standing on something solid here. So I do consider this to be a form of media Gnosticism because we are emphasizing knowledge over belief, rejecting belief, and we recognize the media, the architect of this deception, as our opponent, adversary, enslaver, mental enslaver. The demiurge, creator of the world, is the architect. That's what demiurge means, the architect. So the media architect, that constructs this big illusion, is like Christoph in the Truman Show, manufacturing our internalized simulation. And so the instant you unplug from it, you're no longer giving it your energy, your emotion, your attention in the same way. You're not a loosh cow. So you've risen above the Truman Show. And I think similarly, when you understand what the world is in relation to this spirit soul dichotomy, you can quite literally unplug from feeding the archonic system. Archon means ruler. And the demiurge concept, the architect builds this place and establishes its rulers. And its rulers are here to extract your soul by any means necessary. And it would seem to me that the manufactured history is a huge source of, quote, loosh extraction, soul extraction, getting you to engage. And there's a lot of parallels between archonic control and manipulation by people with certain personality disorders, and how a lot of the times it's a matter of getting under the other person's skin and triggering them with regularity to elicit responses. So does the media elicit a response from you? Do you see something on TV and have an emotion over it? Have they rendered you emotionally incontinent? You see something on TV and the tears flow, the anger rises? Or have you risen above that? Have you unplugged? Are you detached? Because I'm detached. I do not, here's the thing. We have limited bandwidth. The attention economy wants to use all your time. You have only so many F's to give every day. Do you really want to give a large portion of your greatest resource to propaganda matrix operatives and provocateurs who are just selling you fear and insecurity so they can lead you to some voting booth where you're voting for some actor under the illusion this is going to make things better for you? And I'm not trying to be black pill or pessimistic, but we live in the lie world order. This whole construct, this architecture of deception is built on accepted lies. And I've detached, I've rejected the lies. They don't work on me anymore. I don't get triggered in the same way. And I'm not so easy to manipulate. And I think largely in part it's because in media, the manipulation that I've observed that we deconstruct has a lot of analogies between interpersonal manipulation. And having spent a lot of time around extremely manipulative people, I think I've somewhat picked up these very strong analogies. Like, for example, when I say that the left and right, the alternative and conspiracy, rather, because conspiracies are generally on the right, and I can explain this with the whiteboards better, but there's a triangulation evident in how the news stories are presented to us. So every story affects the right and the left in different ways, mutually exclusive ways. Their martyr is their villain. Their villain is their martyr. And this triangulation is meant to keep the sides antagonistic to one another so they do not reconcile or agree on anything. The media is the triangulator. And so one is the favored, the other is the rejected. So you have the golden child scapegoat dynamic, which exists in toxic relationships or families or relationships where the manipulator puts two individuals against one another. Well, that's what they've done with media. It's built into the system. And it's done along the lines of the political horseshoe theory implemented as model. So there's never going to be peace between the factions. And the reason why is that they're using this internalized Truman Show to create mind war. So you're always having this sublimated civil war. It's built into the system. Spotless says, on the rare occasion I watch the news, I sit, make jokes, and laugh about it. So I'm taking their energy. Yeah, you're alchemizing it. I've compared the Infinite Plane Society to Mystery Science Theater, where the characters are captives. They're a captive audience, these hostile aliens who force them to watch bad science fiction until they go crazy. They don't go crazy because they laugh at the bad science fiction. And I'm saying the reason why we haven't gone crazy is because we haven't been brainwashed. We haven't fallen for it, largely because we've taken the perspective of film critics. We're detached from it. We're not immersed in it. And I enjoy the news. I enjoy the psyops. I enjoy the reactions, as predictable as they are. I'm very much conspiratained all the time. I took a 10-day media fast last year, and I was completely at peace. I'm not addicted to this. I don't need this. However, I rather enjoy this, and I don't plan to ever stop. I like where it's going, and it is going somewhere. And I think things are only going to get more interesting. But I'm not like political. I'm not feeding the psyops. My objective here is let's foment a minor intellectual revolt, gather together a third branch of media, and approach things in a more philosophical manner. We can be an oasis of sanity in this misinformed, psyoped world. I mean, Planet Netflix is insane. And that's what we're living in. And it's not like art imitates life, that the artists who make these movies are just mirroring what they see. No, that's not what's happening here. The predictive programming, the concurrent programming, only ever foreshadows fake events, not real things. So what you could say is that psyops imitate art. And that's an important distinction, because the conspiratainment crowd, the conspiracy theorist crowd, notice predictive programming, but they miss the point. They always say these weird, like I saw this guy on Joe Rogan recently, and he's like, the Luciferians are casting spells, and they get your consent to do bad things. They tell you they're going to do it in movies. That's the old explanation for predictive programming. So predictive programming explanations are higher power, lower power, like simulation did it, or the bad Luciferians did it. That's where they're stuck. And Joe Rogan's actually listening to this crap. Like, okay, that's the acceptable explanation for what we're seeing. No, predictive programming actually reveals a hand-in-glove relationship between entertainment and psychological warfare waged on the public through the news. That's what it actually shows us. And that's something they wouldn't want out on the Joe Rogan show, because when you go there and you trace the predictive programming content, you can start naming directors, the writers, and the actors who are directly or 1 degree separated from being involved in government psychological warfare ops. You think they want that out there in that context, explained in that way? Probably not. But that's exactly how it is. You want to think these directors are just like the simulation crowd would say, no, these are just coincidences. The directors are in touch with the zeitgeist because they're artists and they're just downloading ideas. No, that's not what's happening. These are sellouts. And they're part of the manufacturing of our shared fake history. Spotless Leopard says the psyops are getting easy to see through, like they're trying to wake people up. I've heard that since 2016. I do not think it's true. I've heard people say, oh, they're sending us signals. They're winking at us. The good guys are fighting it, or they're trying to wake people up. No, that's not true. PsyOps have always been terrible. If you go back, and we're going back, we're doing a breakdown of 1963 to 2026, every single PsyOp, they've always looked low budget, fake, government actors guild, the gags. These aren't Hollywood actors. They've always been sloppy. But the thing was, there wasn't always the internet, so we could bring back all the footage and listen to it again and watch it again and retro auto hoax it. That wasn't always possible. So it wasn't easy for one person to get enough information to make an informed determination about what they're saying, because we've been so separate, atomized, and nobody has access to this tremendous body of content, which we do now. And thanks to AI, I can provide receipts. So nobody's trying to wake anybody up. And the people in the PsyOps aren't even awake. Not entirely. It's too compartmentalized. Have you ever seen somebody, quote, wake up? I have not. And I've explained stuff, I've pointed things out for years, and I realized it doesn't make sense to try. Because if their perspective is world stage, nothing you say will stick. It will float around, but it won't stick. You're not dealing with people who are systematizing knowledge and having an objective a view of things, but rather believers who are just more or less amalgamating a lot of disparate beliefs. It's actually incoherent. There's so many contradictions built into the world stage. But it's certainly not obvious. And I think it's important to maintain that we're not dealing with something that's super obvious. If it was, it would be obvious. People wouldn't have problems seeing through it. Spotless Leopard says, the Trump shooting, though, I've never seen anything look so desperate. That's your opinion. And I'm saying that as someone who knows it's fake, because you could not stand in front of a room full of people and point out how it's fake by looking at the visuals. I'm saying I take the approach here, this concept I call the blindfolded skeptic. If you can't explain how it's fake without pointing at the video, you don't have a case today. You certainly won't have a case as generative video gets exponentially better. So you have to have a better process, a methodology on hand for how to deconstruct fake events that does not rely on the visuals. Again, pointing at the visuals and saying it's obviously fake it's fallacious. It's an appeal to personal incredulity, because they can say, oh, you think it looks fake? I think it looks real. And you don't get anywhere with that. But when you provide the background, the hoax indicators, the context, the political utility, the concurrent predictive programming, the model itself, yeah, then you can explain how it's fake. I could explain how 9/11 was just a movie with no casualties in 5 minutes in a dark room. Garange says, how do you recommend dealing with this world while minimizing one's loosh giving? So how do you avoid being a loosh cow? It's about the pause, the suspension of judgment, skepticism. You know, I call the IPS think tank pyromaniacs on the world stage, because we're burning down. That's the idea. But Pyro is like the first skeptic. And their concept was, if you automatically believe every rumor, you're always going to be stressed out. You're going to be emotionally engaged in things that don't matter. The solution was epiky, the word meaning suspending judgment until you get more facts. So if you stop believing headlines, you just see headlines. And like every time I see an Alex Jones email, it's like World War III imminent. It doesn't register as a threat. I don't look at any headlines as real. I'm like, okay, I'm not giving the system the benefit of the doubt. They're constructing history. So if you wait a couple of days before you take the story seriously and dig into it, you avoid the emotional impact. So as long as you're suspending judgment, or you're starting off with the premise that it's fake unless proven real. So if they don't have overwhelming evidence that it's true and real, you're not obligated to treat it as such. That's how you protect yourself. It's like, how do you avoid being emotionally manipulated? If your girlfriend or whatever boyfriend comes over and they're crying, Are you going to change your day because you see tears? Are you going to assume that these tears are real? Because manipulators fake emotion. Crisis actors, they fake emotion. And because the reason why they use crisis actors, the reason why Erica Kirk cried on TV is because most people respond to that empathically. They feel like that's real. And so they feel the same emotion. They resonate with it. So if you can be emotionally manipulated in your personal relationships, it means that you don't have effective boundaries, shields. It means that you're open to manipulation. And if you're open to psychological warfare manipulations, it means that you have certain logical fallacies that you're probably not addressing. And it's not your fault, because the government gave you mind aids. That was part of your indoctrinations. Whenever you went through school, religion, they give you a mentally compromised your mental immune system is compromised. So in other words, mind aids, maids, means they've taken away the critical thinking faculties you would need to reject stories at face value. Instead, you just take it all in. So they just program you with mind viruses 24/7. And unless you actively push back against them, you will be infected. So I made this distinction between active and passive news consumption. The active news consumer blocks everything and assesses it. The passive news consumer believes it all. Freedom Awaits says, I think you know what? I don't know what you're doing here. I saw your other comment. If you're Mandela affected, chemtrail pusher, anti-vax, you're a world stager. You're not a skeptic. We don't need that here. So let's go ahead and give this guy a break. Come back in 24 hours. It's enough time to order the handbook for the recently deprogrammed. See, what you're doing here, by coming here suggesting that I'm promoting vaxes, that I'm promoting chemtrails, you're exhibiting the cult mindset of us and them. You've fallen into the Masonic Hegelian dialectic, the black and the white tiles in the Masonic Lodge, the black and the white pillar, the duality, the political horseshoe, the bifurcation. You're falling for it. You are establishment media. And I'm talking to Freedom Awaits. Freedom Awaits is establishment media because he's an anti. If you're anti-vax, you're controlled opposition. If you're anti-chemtrail, you're controlled op. If you're pushing any anti-position, you're taking the side of the scapegoat in the triangulation. You're inside the political horseshoe. And none of these beliefs are in a vacuum. So if you're anti-vax, then we know you're also going to be Team Candace Owens. You're anti-Israel. You're going to fall for the Charlie Kirk was killed by Netanyahu. We can pretty much read your entire belief system based on these two opinions. And this position, off-world stage, doesn't make room for antis. I'm anti the pro, I'm anti the anti. I'm non. But the fact that you want to lump me in with pro-vax because I'm not an anti-vaxxer shows that you're not thinking, you're reacting. You're programmed. You're a propaganda mule weighed down by a bunch of red pills in your saddlebags, just disseminating it like you're a good guy, calling me out like I'm somehow a bad guy. And then you throw in emojis. You're an adult using emojis. Like, you need to stop that. The penguin one is fine. But if you think you've made a point and your mic drop moment is to throw down a laughing emoji, you don't have a point. That's actually a horse laugh, appeal to ridicule. It doesn't help your case. So again, Freedom Awaits was trolling my comments earlier. And then I had to get rid of another person who claimed that her best friend's cousin's uncle's grandfather was 6 degrees separated from a 9/11 jumper. And I'm like, get out of here. FOH. Not that we need to kick people out, because if you really think that way, like if you really believe that you're doing good as an anti and you're in the mind war, you're not going to survive on the off-world stage. You're not going to get it. You're going to stay in the Truman Show, and you're going to walk around with this false sense of moral superiority, virtue signaling. Like, look, I'm anti-Bill Gates. I mean, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, two fake characters. These are both billionaires, but note the bifurcation. Elon Musk is a hero to the right, villain to the left. Bill Gates, hero to the left, villain to the right. Any one of these psyops is given away, and they all have the same attribute. You can tell it's fake if the interpretation is perfectly split two ways for the triangulated parties. I'm not triangulated. I'm not in their mind control system. I'm out of their psychological war zone. You're having the info war. You have the mind war in your head. And you're like, oh, this guy's an enemy. You've been tribed up with a bunch of controlled opposition shills and agents. And you're going to hear this, and you're going to think I'm bad for saying it. And that's because you're programmed. And that's fine. Go with the program if that's what works for you. I prefer intellectual independence, autonomy, freedom, free thinking, open-mindedness, not being mind controlled. I'm not being cattle prodded anywhere. And I'm certainly not a propaganda mule for anybody. Garang says, how does one build healthy boundaries in private and against networks? Yeah, look, the archonic concept of these covert controls, the way you see through it is by understanding, I think, mostly the fact that you're a target in a mind war and that you're a target of manipulation. So you have to, I guess, look at interpersonal manipulative tactics. Look at cult mind control in particular and cult deprogramming. There's a good source for cult deprogramming. His name is Rick Ross, who helps people who escape cults stay out of cults. Because what happens is people will leave one and go into another. And you'll see the same pattern. Somebody will leave a terrible relationship and go into another. Well, why is that? It's because they haven't actually patched up the holes yet. And what we're doing here, this is mind war inoculation. When you see through the PSYOP entertainment complex, you won't fall for this stuff and you won't be taking sides like a useful stooge, like freedom awaits. What an ironic name. Freedom awaits. It's like, I can hear the chains rattling. You're a mind-controlled slave of the Illuminati. They own you. Garang says, you just described Joseph Atwill through Candace, who killed Charlie. Chairs aren't solid. Kirk. Yeah, look, I was surprised to find, I shouldn't be surprised. But there are so many people out there who are very bright, who see through certain events, they take apart certain things, and they fall for the next one. So you have to fix your operating system. Like the cult thing. You go from one cult to the next. You fall for one psyop and the next. You have to fix your operating system. And this is an operating system. It's not a belief system. I'm not giving people a list of things not to believe in. I'm saying this is how you upgrade your mentality so you don't fall for this crap. Mainstream and alternative are belief system A, belief system B. Belief systems are passive. You do not need to be adopting belief systems. You should actually be a knower, a Gnostic about this stuff. Tim says, is the end result of the constant polarization, are we supposed to reach equilibrium? No, this is the end result. It's the perpetual war that George Orwell wrote about. There's never going to be a reconciliation. There's never going to be a great awakening. Nobody's going to wake up at scale. This is perpetual motion. It's going to stay this way. It's a tug of war. And I've been looking into a lot of my books on the matter of the concept of the New Age and this idea that we're being collectively manipulated and moved. I look at these things considering that it seems like there's this tug of war that's built into the system. And I mentioned the Masonic pillars because we're always seeing the symbolism around these events. And there's consistently stuff associated with that particular body of symbols. And for a long time, we've talked about how the 33rd degrees motto is order out of chaos. And order out of chaos describes this Hegelian dialectic. Proposition A, proposition B, and then the synthesis between the two. And that's kind of what they do, is they set up these two sides. And so they agree on something that was predetermined for you to agree upon, even though you're on opposite sides. So it's like, for example, is the Earth dying? Are we destroying the earth? Are human beings a problem? Do you accept that premise? Because I don't. I think earth is anti-fragile. I think we can do anything we want. I don't think we can destroy this place. I mean, obviously, I'm not suggesting being bad to the environment, but I'm saying that no, we're not tumors on the face of Gaia, as they would have you believe. However, like even if we wanted to, we could not. I don't think we could destroy the earth by overusing its resources the way the environmentalists say, because I don't think that's how things work. I think that we will adapt. There's this artificial scarcity, like peak oil, that's been inserted into everything, but I don't think it's true. However, the left and the conspiracy theorists, mainstream alternative, both believe man is destroying the world. The left says it's our CO2 output. The climate change people say that we are destroying the world because of capitalism. And the conspiracy theorists will say climate change is fake. What's really destroying the world is chemtrails. So they both agree the world's being destroyed, but they disagree on the cause. One side blames the private sector, the other side blames the government, the secret government. So they can advance every single agenda with these two factions triangulated against each other who never agree on anything, but they accept the same premise. And it's like this with every conspiracy. The mainstream accepts that Charlie Kirk is dead. The conspiracy theorists accept that he's dead. But the mainstream thinks Antifa did it. The conspiracy theorists out there will say Israel did it or the deep state did it. But they both agree it was done. And we're challenging that whole premise. So they assume the essential reality on everything. But it doesn't mean they agree in any meaningful way. Like they're not joining sides. Oh, Charlie's dead, let's unite. No, it's like Charlie's dead, you did it. No, Charlie's dead, they did it. I mean, the irony of it now is that Candace Owens is now saying Turning Point USA killed Charlie. Erica Kirk killed Charlie. And this, like I said earlier, this entire rollout of this expose on Erica Kirk where she's exposed as this evil villain, that's fake. It's 100% fake. And it's put out there for you to think you have a clue. Like, I figured out who did Charlie, it was her. Well, they planted it there so you never question the essential reality of Kirk's death. One of the main guardrails keeping people on the world stage is the false presumption that people actually die in psyops. And this includes the anti-vax thing, by the way. Vaxageddon never happened. There wasn't a genocide. I hear some anti-vaxxers say it, like, oh, we survived the genocide of 2020. No, there wasn't one. Didn't happen. Those people falling on their faces in Wuhan are probably actors. Dancing nurses were real. I have more evidence that the hospitals were full of twerking nurses than you have for some spike in the death tolls. Garank says, do you think Joe messed up with only Flavian reading? He missed gnosis, human occult anatomy, astrotheological aspects in the Bible. You know, I wanted to talk to him about this because I think that Joseph Atwell's explanation of the Romans creating a sun god Messiah in Scripture makes sense. He said that they weren't idolaters. They weren't going to worship Caesar. They worshiped Scripture. So they gave them a text-based version of their sun god motif. And I'm on board with the idea that the governments create gods. And that's not even a controversial statement. I don't think, though, he went super deep, but what he did uncover was metascript. What Joseph Atwell really uncovered was, so when I say metascript, we're talking about the story, the history, the manufactured history. That's what we're talking about. So his contention here was that the Romans manufactured Christianity in order to reel in this other group of the Jews with them and get them to unite in the empire. And that idea isn't far-fetched. If you look at Serapis, which is one of the greatest examples of this. So Serapis is a god that looks kind of like Jesus, and that's probably because of his Dionysian or yeah, I think it's like a Dionysus wine god look. But he's also mixed with Zeus and Osiris. And the reason why is that this god was created to unify the worshippers of these disparate gods. So they created this Frankenstein's monster of a god, called it Cerberus. So now all these people are worshiping this consolidated deity. So the notion that governments create gods to unite people is not that far-fetched. In fact, I look at the mainstream mediation, the worldview we have through media, as the ultimate success of this strategy. They have consolidated worldview globally, not through one religion conquering everybody, but by creating a new belief system that supersedes the religions. And I've been talking about the architecture of this. In fact, I put a book out called The Secret Religion of the Elite, where I started, and I should probably revisit that, where I started showing the architecture of this, how space replaces heaven. Virus is a new iteration of sin. The state church, being media, also has similar divisions to the Catholic versus Protestant thing. That you have this essential division between saved and unsaved. The flood myths have been reintroduced to us. So Noah's Ark has been brought back as climate change, and they even appropriate the symbolism. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, warns us of the floods if we don't stop our wicked pollution. Angels, archaic. Aliens, modern iteration. So this alien rapture story that's spreading, it's by design, because they're replacing the old rapture stories, or rather, they're supplementing it, because they're not getting rid of the old stuff. They still have this traditional versus progressive worldview, constant tug of war. So they're not really replacing it in that sense, but they're definitely having this worldview warfare built on this division. Garang says, should one point these things out to normies or religious folk? You know, I don't have any reason to proselytize. Like, if you're a therapist, do you go around offering therapy to people? Like, hey, I can see that you're very insecure. You want to talk about it? Or, you know, your God's fake. Thought you might want to know. You're probably worshiping some malevolent architect of this material realm, and you're missing the real source of creation. Like, if you want to proselytize, go for it. I slammed the door in the faces of proselytizers, Jehovah's Witnesses. If I see those guys on bikes, you know, the white button-up shirts and the bikes, the Mormons, I cross the street. If I see Mormons coming down the sidewalk, I run across the street. I'm not going to be proselytized to. I'll talk to Scientologists, honestly. I see them at street fairs giving stress tests because I think it's interesting. But the reason why you can't point these things out is that they're believers. So you have to understand that they're not Gnostics, they're believers. As such, you could list 100 things that are fake. And if they believe it, that's not good enough. You don't want them to just take your word for it. That's passive. Instead, you have to update their operating system so they consciously understand why each of these things is unbelievable and fake. But economically, it doesn't make sense. As far as time, energy, I mean, think about it. If you're running like a, let's say you're in an intelligence agency and you need somebody in a certain area to have influence, you're better off recruiting somebody who's already in that position than getting some newbie to join this place and move up in the ranks. So in other words, the people who are totally brainwashed will take a lot more effort to get to the level we need them at when we could just reach out to people who are already trying to find their way out of the Truman Show. And they're easy to identify. Anybody who didn't fall for the Charlie Kirk event is a candidate for the off-world stage. They're already there. They've done most of the work. If they've recognized that media fakery does not involve bloodshed, that psyops don't kill people, they're ready for this. Now, if they're stuck on an anti-position, they're not going to go off-world stage. Like Freedom Awaits, no, he's stuck in his anti-vax position, which is connected to a bunch of other issues. And these issues exist on the world stage, which rests on the premise that decades of fake news before was all real. So they're still living in the construct. The only people worth reaching out to are those who have started to leave the construct and just don't have a place to go. And that's the issue here. There's no platform for this. We've created it, but we need to fill it up now. We need to essentially make it accessible to people who are scattered throughout, and it's all by design. There was a deliberate intention here to exclude people who aren't falling for the mainstream acceptable conspiracy theories. We've been removed from the conversation. That's why Joe Rogan has this clown on who says the Luciferians do predictive programming to get our permission to do bad things. Like, I'm sorry, but if you've never talked to a Luciferian, how do you know this stuff? Like, people say revelation of the method. It's the thing the dark wizards do to avoid bad karma for doing bad things. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I have not come across any dark wizards, and I don't know their protocol for human sacrifice. Like, where are you getting this? It's truth or mythology. It's noise. You know, and just the discernment here needs to be directed at noise and signal and separating them. Conspiratainment is fun, but it's noise. The signal is what our focus is on here. Garang says, has the state always done this? Yeah, I think that the New World Order, this one world religion, whatever you want to call it, I think that it's the old world order with a new update. So, for example, Old Testament, New Testament, you're talking about a body of work that tells what came before, where it started, creation, how we got here. The second half is about now. They call it the Living Bible. It tells us about the future even. So you have this split between the past and the present. And with the news, you got the real-time news, and then we have our history. So I kind of look at this as a similar model where our history tells us where we came from, Big Bang to the present, and the news tells us what's going on today and what's going to happen in the future. So I've been calling the News Testament, because it is formulating our worldview, conforming us to their frame. So the Black Mirror is essentially the holy book. You know, like if the world had been taken over by some religious cult and everybody was walking around with their little religious book and their face is buried in it, it would look like a hive mind. And they're all getting a shared worldview through this frame of reference. Well, that's what holy books do. Every religion is a frame of reference. It's a creation story, where we're going, the all-encompassing explanation for everything. That's what they all offer. But the media is the newest religion, and it's actually superseded, replaced, eclipsed all the previous attempts at unifying mankind. Now, there's a Latin phrase, instrumentum regni, instrument of monarchy. I'll put a link in the chat if you want to look into this, because I happen to think that this is one of the best explanations for what we're experiencing. So the concept here is that the masses need to be held under the control of the state. And the reason why it's given here is that, quote, every multitude is fickle, lawless, full of unreasoned passion, violent anger, and must be held in check by invisible terrors and pageantry. So this is a quote from Polybius. And what he's talking about is, quote, superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. And what he's suggesting is that for the sake of the common people, because the masses are unruly, their leadership have adopted the strategy of introducing, quote, gods, beliefs, the terrors of hell into the public mind to keep them under control. So in other words, mind control through worldview warfare, it has always been the norm. And this is a very culty thing. You know, you get the public into this framework where there are certain things. If they do this, bad things will happen. So, for example, the climate change thing. That's under threat of duress. You must recycle, you must regulate, you must make these changes, or Gaia is going to flood the place. It's like Noah, you must change your wicked ways, or God's going to flood the place. Well, these are God constructs. These are myths. These are useful strategies for getting people to act. Sort of like Santa. You know, you behave if you want gifts. Well, that's a superstition, but the idea is that if you want your kids to behave because they're full of unreasoned passions and lawlessness, you know, provide this incentive structure and de-incentives or disincentivize bad behavior. So in a way, we're treated like children. It's somewhat infantilizing. It's definitely manipulative, and it operates on the premise that we're unreasonable. But my contention here is that they make us unreasonable. They give us the compromised mental immune system so they can control and manipulate. But there are times I question, you know, is this the best of all possible worlds? I mean, is Mind War superior to the real thing? And so Walter Lippmann, he wrote The Phantom Public. So if you've read Edward Bernays' Propaganda, you know, Edward Bernays, you know, these are pivotal thinkers in the field of media and its influence. So Edward Bernays invented the PR stunt. He's the father of modern PR. He's the uncle of one of the co-founders, original CEOs of Netflix, and related to Sigmund Freud, which is a very interesting connection if you think about understanding what's going on subconsciously, controlling the entertainment to influence the public. But his book Propaganda really starts off with this notion that for our own good, we need to be bossed around by this hidden group of influencers. Well, Walter Lippmann's book, which preceded Bernays and influenced him, this is 100 years ago, he had suggested then that manufactured crises are used to gauge the public opinion. And if 51% of the population want a certain thing to go a certain way, they can gauge that opinion and enact the changes without it coming to force. So he's called this a sublimated civil war. But anyway, Walter Lippmann's theory essentially is that we are being manipulated and controlled in such a way that we've lost any real power. It's not actually democratic. Let me see here. Edward Bernays, like Lippmann, worked for the Committee on Public Information during the war years and were attracted by the same talk. Yeah, this is great stuff, though, if you want to consider how long ago this has been talked about. The Phantom Public, I mean, 100 years ago, they were calling out how we are a bewildered herd led by propagandists. This is not a new concept. Geraint says, where are these Lifetime actors coming from? Charlie's face doesn't even look real. Tupac shaped. Yeah, okay, well, Tupac's mom was from the Black Panthers. So there's already some intel connection. But I don't think you need mind control. Like, I don't think these are like mind-controlled servants. MK Ultra, which has been a theory. I think that's disinformation. I think you're looking at actors. And where do you find them? All over the place. People are easy to buy. There are sellouts among us. They're everywhere. I've run some tests on this. There are so many out-of-work actors who would participate in a fake school shooting for money. It's not even funny how cheap they are. But if you think about the role of spycraft in human society, going back pretty much forever, agents, traitors, embedded spies, informants, liars in plain sight, that's not new. And so like the movie Utopia, if you haven't seen Utopia, it's pretty good. The first season, the American version, it actually has crisis actors faking a flu, faking a sickness. The whole movie actually is predictive programming for 2020. But in that one, the actors that populated the fake events lived in this separate island, and they called it Utopia. They were separate from us. But anyway, where did these actors come from? I'm not exactly sure if they're drawn from any specific place. I'm not sure how they would come about. I'm assuming it has to do with connections. I mean, you look at so many influencers, like Andrew Tate's dad, CIA, Tucker Carlson's dad, CIA. Go down the line, and you'll find that a lot of these people in these positions are connected to somehow. They're connected. They're already born in a certain subset. Jim Morrison's father, military intelligence. What was that? Laurel Canyon. There's a book about Laurel Canyon. But anyway, the idea of manufactured counterculture isn't new. I would say that the UFO community is a manufactured government-created counterculture. That's true for conspiracy theories in general. And where do they get, like a Trump, for example, Donald Trump? How did he get chosen for this? What was his particular set of qualifications? It's an interesting question, because whatever you think about him, the persona of Trump, the historic character, was already preordained to exist. He was already scripted. There's predictive programming for Donald Trump as far back as 1958. So, he's like 12 years old, and he's already being prophesied. And he didn't even reach the form he's in right now, like his BIF 10 in the future phase, until the last 6 or 7 years. So when we're looking at these individuals, like the Kirks, the Trumps, Musk, you're looking at actors who are fulfilling roles that were from the meta script. In other words, roles that are going to be performed through psyops that the public will accept as real. Spotless Leopard said, what about the 60s British show The Prisoner? A hell of a lot in that, particularly when looked at with modern eyes. I'll have to look into it. And if you have not seen Newsbenders, this is required watching. Newsbenders is a 30-minute play, 1968, and it's about a journalist who moves up in the media company, and he confronts somebody from the Central World News Services. And the CWNS has agents in every newsroom, and their job is to help insert fake events or pre-planned news 5 years in advance. So every time we're looking at these fake events, you have to consider how far in advance was it planned. Well, in Newsbenders, it was 5 years. So our future is planned 5 years in advance, and their rationale was explained that this is the best way to achieve world peace. That after the nuke, it was understood that we need to put the brakes on whatever we're doing. So we're going to take over the news and pacify the masses. And so that's 5 years. Well, I'm saying from my research and from what I can show receipts for it, and you'll see this as the great deconstruction proceeds, 5 years is understating it. It's decades. And the reason why this is significant is that Newsbenders isn't just bending the news, it's bending history. So the ebook I just put out on Ko-Fi, it's called, and it's a work in progress. It's a collection of PSYOP breakdowns, and you can just see where I'm going with it. It's the beginning stages of this project. It's called it's called the History of Newsbending. Because there's a cumulative effect of these fake events that has diverged our timeline from real to this subjective, curated version of things. Garang says, are they castes above society, like bloodlines born and bred to steer the masses? Miles Mathis thinks so. Miles Mathis, who does a lot of great work, although he's not a full-on off-world stager. I'm not sure where he's at, big picture-wise. But event by event, I don't think his methodology is as good as ours. He doesn't provide the hoax indicators, nor does he evaluate the concurrent predictive programming. So he's not exactly on par with what we're doing with regard to media deconstruction, but I do appreciate his analyses. And he has suggested that the people who participate in these events are essentially connected to intelligence. Their families are integrated into this thing. So they're not just randos recruited to take part in these things. He thinks it comes down to bloodline. I think it comes down to security clearance. I use the phrase security clearance society instead of secret society. What's the difference? So if you look at a secret society or fraternities like the Masons, the Masonic Lodge concept is built on stonemasons and their guilds. And their guilds had layers of knowledge that was protected by security clearance. So their little grips that they do indicates how far up they are, how much they can be trusted with. So the main character in their play is the architect of King Solomon's temple, and he dies protecting the secret, and that's why he's granted resurrection, because he was so good he preserved the secrets even at the cost of his own life. So ultimately, it's about the security clearances. Can you be trusted with secrets? Will you die to protect the secrets? Will you submit to the blood oaths, knowing that if you say it, if you talk about it, they will kill you? So in other words, it really is about, are you compromised or are you loyal? Have you determined this loyalty? Have you been given the clearance to know this stuff? So you don't even necessarily have to consider it as a separate caste or a bloodline. It's like in the military. Anybody can choose a certain field and gain clearance. In fact, the idea that you could isolate it to a small group is one of the major red herrings plaguing any sort of attempt to find out who's in control. You have people who spend their entire lives saying the Jesuits control the world, the Masons control the world, Israel controls the world, whiteness controls the world. You have all these different whodunits, like this guy did it, this group did it, which expose that the reptilians are doing it. But the people who are chasing the whodunit haven't fully figured out what it is. So if you haven't figured out what it is, if you haven't discerned the program from reality, if you haven't discerned the world stage as a model, then you're wasting your time trying to figure out who did it. That's actually just noise. Lean Dion says, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by Dave McGowan is the book that, the book on the manufactured counterculture. I'm going to bookmark that. David McGowan. The very strange but nevertheless true story of the 1960s hippie utopia Laurel Canyon. A dizzying array of musical artists congregated to create music that provided the soundtrack for these turbulent times. You know what this reminds me of? Look at this. The dark underbelly of the 60s Laurel Canyon, where rock stars, military ops, political figures, and Charlie Manson's cult intersected. Did the CIA create the hippies? Yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about. Plants. Plants that are recruited to do these jobs in society. It's like grassroots level control. But this reminds me of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, where she had a Laurel Canyon. Basically, the idea was that they were going to reset society. So they took the best artists, the best musicians, the best of everything, and they gathered them all in this place they called Atlantis. It's hidden somewhere in Colorado. And then they decided they were going to just essentially pull the plug on society, let it all go dark, and then start from scratch. But the idea of recruiting influencers and then setting them loose, that's what we see all the time. All of the big channels, all of the big influencers on YouTube and otherwise that are pushing conspiracy theories, these are your controlled opposition. These are agents in place. It's one of two things. And you can remove plausible deniability, and you can rule out the possibility that some people are innocent in this. But it's either these people are agents or they're really, really dumb and manipulated. So take your pick. Because if they've participated in any PSYOP, you have to presume they've got some security clearance. Alex Jones was at January 6th. Owen Schroyer, January 6th. Anybody who was close to the Charlie Kirk, that little circle there, the people carried his body to the car. These people are too close to fake events to be looked at as real. Turning Point USA, those guys have all got to be government operatives, provocateurs, and this would include Candace Owens because she's part of that small circle of people. She was affiliated with TPUSA. She was one of their first marketing directors, I think. So my point of it is, these people are all plants. This is like Laurel Canyon is just one example. This is widespread. I don't trust big channels that stay true to all of the alternative media orthodoxies. This is why I'm a stickler to certain things. If you're anti-vax, fine, you're controlled. If you're a big channel and you're pushing anti-vax documentaries, you're a government operative. You have to be. It's not just a grift, because this is agitprop. Target demographics are being hit with certain propaganda, and it's consistent. And if you're in Trutherville, you're either an agent disseminating propaganda or you're a propaganda mule with good intentions. And which one would you rather follow? Like, do you want to follow people who have exhibited enough to where you can discern that these people are insiders and manipulators? Why would you follow that? I mean, I study them. I'm aware of what they say, but I know what they are. Lean says they must have had a good laugh when they drove Charlie away. Oh, yeah. It would have been fun, I bet. And that was super rehearsed. I mean, there are so many anomalies in that thing. People have noted these things. Like, why is this guy running around and then getting on top of the wall so he can record as they run by? It was choreographed. But still, it's notable here that big channels with 600,000 subs are able to talk about maybe Charlie's dead, but they can't figure it out. They think, well, Tyler must have been screwed over because I think Tyler's been arrested. It's like, if he is not dead, then Tyler is an actor. If Tyler's an actor, then what about his parents? What about the news media that interviewed them? Are they tricking the news? No, it creates a bigger picture. So these simulated historic events are bigger than a hoax. A hoax, the word hoax, more or less makes it seem like a small group of people pulled something off. No, these are big. Decades in the planning. These are major historic events. So I think that out of habit, the truthers are understating the significance of fakery, and they're not recognizing the sheer scale of it. Nobody is. They're skewed. They're skewed towards real, and then some things are fake. No, it's fake. Some things are real, but not in the sense of it being real, but as in like people pretending it's real. So yeah, we've been collectively indoctrinated into belief systems that make this simulation plausible, and people go along with this thing because it's the program, and they have no idea they're being programmed because they don't have the right operating system. And one way to understand operating systems and how they've changed, if you're an Alex Jones listener, everything on the news is either real or false flag. Real or false flag. That's their system. False flag means it's real, but somebody else did it. So you see how these operating systems automatically exclude the truth. It doesn't start off with perhaps the whole thing's fake in a construct, or it's a false flag, or it's real as presented. No, they don't have three options. It's a binary. That's why that freedom awaits guy, I kicked him out because he's stuck in the binary. The us, them, us is right, them is bad. HG says, do you think Miles Mathis is anti-vax? Yeah, I think he's anti-vax, and I think he's also J-pill. And those go together. If you're J-pill, you're anti-vax. If you're anti-vax, you're J-pill, even if you don't know it. This is one of the tricks. The entire red pill community and that body of conspiracy theories. So you look at a map, if I diagram this, a big circle is the mainstream view. Truthers are a subset, a circle in the circle. Well, that circle in the circle is on the same side as the far right. So every red pill conspiracy is in fact a subset of far right. And when we say far right or woke right, what we're talking about is a worldview framed on the premise that Israel controls the world. But most red pill conspiracies will say, oh, it's George Soros. It's the globalists. They won't say Israel by name. Well, they'll say the Rothschilds, the bankers. So they use euphemisms to hide the fact that red pill conspiracies are in fact a subset of J pill or critical Israel theory. Critical Israel theory is to the right what critical race theory is to the left. This is another one of their dialectics. So if you think that you're clever, smart, or aware because you're like, oh, let's talk about Israel, you're basically woke. You know, like Elon Musk is like, we got to get rid of the woke mind virus, and he purges the left from X, and he replaces it with woke right, because woke exists on both sides. The woke idea is that your group is oppressed, and that's your oppressor, and you're awake to it, and this informs all of your decisions, and you got to wake everybody else up. But the oppressors are different depending on what side of the political horseshoe you're on. They can't both be right. The world can't be run by systemic racism and whiteness and Israel, but they coexist. These belief systems, like that bumper sticker, coexist. It has all the religious symbols. All these belief systems coexist, even though they're mutually exclusive. They can't all be right. Can all the religions be right? No. No. Zeus can't be God if Jehovah's God, if the Muslim God is God, or whoever, fill in the blank. Somebody has to be right. But that's only if you adhere to the rules of, objective reality, logic. If you adhere to that, yeah, somebody has to be right because there's right and wrong. But in this subjective world, everything's relative. There is no right, there is no wrong. These belief systems coexist because people are living in their heads. They don't translate into reality. Sebastian Ginger says, even in Holland, kids talk about Charlie Kirk. Yeah, well, TPUSA has chapters everywhere. It's blowing up, but it's totally inorganic. AstroTurfed, fake grassroots. He was not fake, as in he exists. Because there's this disinformation line. There are disinformation agents out there adding noise saying he never existed. Jim Carrey never existed. Jeffrey Epstein never existed. Ghislaine Maxwell never existed. Elon Musk is just computer generated. There are people who are saying that AI has been ancient. It's always been here, and they've always been using it, and nothing is real. They say that the Mona Lisa was made in Photoshop. That's all noise. And it's not useful or even insightful in any way. I'm just pointing it out because that's a distraction from what we're really talking about. How you have these people who are playing roles on the world stage. So Charlie Kirk is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Anybody who thinks that he's some kind of a Christian martyr or even a Christian has been deceived. And one thing the Charlie Kirk thing really revealed, or if you didn't already know, it shows that most religious right Republicans have zero discernment. It's become stateolatry. They worship essentially government at this point. Hanks G says Miles Mathis is J-pilled. He calls the J's Phoenicians. Makes sense. I don't take J-pill seriously any more than I take BLM seriously. I mean, if you believe in the whole systemic racism and oppression thing, that's your prerogative. And there may be a lot of truth to it, but there's also a lot of stuff that's not true. There are psyop driven events. There are fake martyrs. And at this point, the idea of claiming oppression and victim consciousness as a way to gain power, I think it's just weak. And that's what the far right is trying to do now. It's this idea of claiming to be oppressed as a way to gain power. These are political strategies. But if you're claiming that you're being oppressed by the Phoenicians, or the Phoenicians rule your world, I'm like, you're just as bad as the people who want to claim victim status, oppression status, and blame some overarching entity for everything that's wrong in your life. It's like, I don't know. Seems self-defeating, but it exists on both sides. Although you could make a stronger case for critical race theory than critical Israel theory, because critical Israel theory is pretty much conspiracy theory, recycled blood libel, whereas at least on the political left, they're able to point to specific laws and conditions and histories that we can verify. But then again, like I said, these positions are also highly hyped up by psychological operations. Like, I don't think Trayvon Martin's dead. I don't think Michael Brown's dead. Eric Garner, not dead. The Terry Nichols, not dead. I don't think any of these BLM martyrs were anything but psyops. George Floyd, I don't think he was killed by Derek Chauvin. I don't think he overdosed. So here's another perfect split bifurcation. The left believes that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd because he was racist and it was a lynching. The right says George Floyd died from fentanyl because Biden left the gates open and China shipped in the fentanyl. So both sides agree George Floyd is dead. Left blames right. Right blames left. Again, this is a pattern. It's a template. And you'll see every single one of these psyops has a different interpretation left and right. Capture the Loop says not dead, not real. Well, they're real. They're just not dead. So you can't get confused. Like, I'm not confused. At no point will I say, I don't know if that's real or not. I'm like, I either know it's real for these reasons or I don't believe it for these reasons. But I don't believe that ambiguity is a sustainable position. So, like, there are people who say George Floyd never existed. Well, he was on video, on photos, a lot of content. You'd have to deal with that first. But we could say that he was playing a role for this event. And you can also look at the fact that he and Derek Chauvin worked together at that nightclub for many years. Imagine working with somebody for years, and then they're arresting you, and you don't say, hey, Derek, could you get your boot off my face? Could you get your knee off my neck, Derek? It doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't he have said that to his coworker? And there was one particular scene that they cut out. There was this guy who worked at that nightclub, and he was being interviewed on the news, and he said, oh yeah, Derek and George were getting their paychecks at the same time, and I remember one day they had this little altercation. So he gave this backstory to Derek and George, how they were friends. But anyway, that story got buried because it disrupts the perception. Capture the Loop says he exists in your mind, and that's all that matters. Well, that's the whole point, is that these actors fabricate events, so the historic event now exists. It's actually in the history books. George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, BLM riots 2020, that's going into the history books as portrayed from a mainstream perspective. But we have to acknowledge that we're looking at actors playing roles. When we get into the realm of nothing's real, nobody exists, that's schizo territory. That's pseudo insight. Like the Emperor's New Clothes. Like, if you were as insightful as me, you would know that these people don't even exist. Show me the evidence for that. Because It's not plausible. It doesn't answer any questions. And if it's going to be a conspiracy theory, to be a theory, it has to answer questions. It has to provide some level of predictability based on the model you provided. If the theory only adds confusion and raises more questions, get rid of it. It's noise. But anyway, the right falls into this he was killed by fentanyl thing. So they still accept that he's dead, which is, again, not the truth. George Floyd and, no, I'm the person who called this out. And then I think Vanity Fair and The Atlantic covered it like weeks later. But after the death of Charlie Kirk, I said, this is the right's George Floyd. And people are like, what are you talking about? Well, going back, Austin Metcalf dies, and Jake Lang, who's a January 6er, tried to turn that into a white Trayvon Martin. He tried to start White Lives Matter. And then you have that girl in the subway getting knifed to death, probably fake. And that was discussed by Charlie Kirk and others, by Stephen Crowder, as this is your George Floyd moment, white America. They said that. Stephen Crowder looks at the camera. America, this is your white George Floyd moment. So then White Lives Matter kicks off on September the 9th. September the 10th, Charlie Kirk dies. So suddenly, nobody cared about the girl killed on the subway, who was the cause of the day, and they were going to put murals everywhere to commemorate her, and they wanted to start off White Lives Matter, because now they had a martyr. Now, the reason why I compared the two is this. George Floyd proves that systemic racism exists. He proves critical race theory is correct. His death, his martyrdom, solidified that part of the political spectrum's worldview. Charlie Kirk's death did the same thing for the right. It shows that the right is threatened by radical Antifa or Israel. Because the whole thing is, of course, it proves that their particular oppressor is real. So now that Charlie Kirk has been killed by Israel, now the woke right has a reason to say, hey, we've got a point. And this has been reiterated many times since, Candace Owens and others, that Kirk was killed for Israel so that they could take on Iran through America that they control through blackmail thanks to Epstein. But anyway, I was saying that Charlie Kirk is going to be a martyr, and he's going to basically be a right-wing George Floyd. Well, it turns out that they both have the same birthday, October 14th. Now, that's kind of funny because they made October 14th into Charlie Kirk Day. And I started this joke on Twitter. I was like, let's celebrate George Floyd's birthday at the same time. And that was one of my most popular tweets. Hundreds of thousands of people comment or viewing it, lots of comments, because people noticed that's really weird that Charlie Kirk and George Floyd have the same birthday. And I'm saying, oh no, these are parallel constructs. They both serve the same political utility as martyrs for their respective side, and martyrs against what each side believes is their central oppressor. Capture the Loop says it's all mind games, mind war. Yes, and have you seen the movie War Games with Ferris Bueller? So it's a 1983 film called War Games, where a supercomputer realizes that thermonuclear war is a no-win. So what does it say? A strange game, the only winning move is not to play. And I put that in the handbook for the recently deprogrammed. And someone earlier was asking, how do you unplug? How do you detach? How do you not be a loosh cow? Well, you recognize this is a game. It's an alt reality game. And it's a strange game. The only winning move is not to play. So if you're anti, like freedom awaits, you're playing. If you're pro, any mainstreamer, you're playing the game. Our position here is non. I'm a conscientious objector to the Psy-War. I'm a non-activist. I'm not playing in their game. So when that anti-vax person comes in here and tries to troll me, I'm like, honestly, I kind of feel sorry for you because you're a victim of mind control and you're a conscript into the mind war that targets you, your family, your loved ones, and that has warped your perception of the world. Like you're shooting yourself in the foot, throwing laughing emojis at me, and I'm a non-combatant in this thing. Like I'm anti-war. You're not anti-war if you're participating in mind war, because mind war is really the ultimate expression of war. It's war taking to its highest level, the supreme art of war. And I think that comes from Sun Tzu. He says the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The highest form of victory is achieved through strategy, psychological influence, rather than direct conflict. This approach prioritizes winning by breaking your enemy's resistance and will to fight. So the supreme art of war is what they're doing right now. And so I have people in here in my comments who have been subdued by the supreme art, by mind war, heckling me because I'm not brainwashed like them. I'm like, really? It's sad. Lean Down says, I trust the accounts of George Floyd's second grade teacher, Miss Sexton. Right. Right. His second grade teacher gets in the news with a picture he drew of him being a judge. He's like, I remember George Floyd. I have his picture framed on my wall, and he's a judge, and there's a Liberty Bell. One of our favorite crisis actresses. And I'm looking at that. I'm like, well, the messaging here is that were it not for this oppressive system, he would have been a judge. Freedom awaits. Thank you for joining. Again, you're an anti. Why don't you go on some anti-Bill Gates channel? Like, if you're anti-vax, this isn't the place for you. If you're fighting the info war, you should be in Alex Jonestown drinking the Kool-Aid with everyone else. I don't know what you think you're doing here. Like, what is your point to being here? You think you're going to convert us to establishment media agitprop? You're going to convert us into propaganda mules? We're going to go around warning people, hey guys, be careful of Bill Gates. Like, what the hell? What do you think you're going to get by being here? Like, serious question. It's for Freedom Awaits. What do you think you're going to get by going to the only skeptical, objectivist, media deconstructionist enclave on the internet? This is the only one. There are no other groups on earth taking this position, working to explode this thing so we can actually form a third branch of media that is skeptical and outside the duopoly. We're singular, unique, outside of the box. We're the only one, and you're going to come over here when you represent one of the factions. Like, you're in the wrong saloon. Like, what the hell are you actually doing here? You're wasting your time. I feel the same thing about J-Pill. If you're a J-Piller, you should go listen to Nick Fuentes and talk about your desire for a teenage trad wife or whatever they're into. Like, what are you doing here? Makes no sense. Jameer May says, have you seen the picture of the author of the Mind War PSYOP next to Kirk and Vance? Yeah, I have. Michael Aquinos, High Priest of the Temple of Set, wrote the book From PSYOP to Mind War at the behest of General Vallely, who was part of TPUSA. So one of the chairmen of TPUSA is the guy that got the Satanists to write the Mind War book. And yes, Michael Aquinos, who's associated with the Satanic Panic, which makes sense now because of the Pizzagate stuff that's come up. He does look like the father of Erica Kirk and J.D. Vance. I mean, he does. He really does. Which would make sense because the Charlie Kirk event is a major Mind War event. It's a PSYOP. And what's more, the fact that you have this general who worked with this guy in the Pentagon writing a manual on PSYOPs as part of TPUSA only shows you that TPUSA itself was a big PSYOP. That from the very inception, its leader was going to be martyred. Anxi says, ever consider using your Metascript deconstruction methods to positions in the prediction markets? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I could give you an insight now. Basically, what we're doing represents a significant marketplace disruption. And when people start turning away from the controlled opposition plantation, when they start reaching this off-world stage perspective, it'll redirect a lot of time, attention, money, content creators. And so this is actually, if you ask me, a good place to consider planting some seeds. If you want to invest in anything, invest in the off-world stage. Freedom Awaits says, watch for my reply. Yeah, go ahead. Make a video, reply. I don't care. I'm not anti-debate. I'm just saying, what the hell are you doing here if you're an anti-vaxxer? Like, I don't get it. That's one of the things I picked up on in 2020, 2021 is that you've got all these operatives, agents, provocateurs, and useful stooges and propaganda mules. Like, what are you really doing here? I don't know. Like, I don't give a damn about Bill Gates. You don't have any evidence. You are a propaganda mind virus carrier, and you think you have the moral high ground when you don't. You never saved any lives. You're probably a voter. And if you're anti-vax, you're part of a belief cluster. It means that you have a lot of other beliefs that are equally fake. You've been psyoped. First, Lil HHP says, explain why there's an image of Jeffrey Epstein on the $20 bill. You know, I've seen that. The problem with it is that Epstein didn't start off at that age. So in his old age, if you put the two side by side, they kind of look the same. But if you put a bandana on, and I think I've actually seen this picture recently. So you take the $20 note, you get your pen, and you draw a bandana on Andrew Jackson's forehead, and it looks like Rambo. So Andrew Jackson looks equally close to Jeffrey Epstein as he does Sylvester Stallone. So my explanation, that's it. It's purely subjective. But it is true that you fold a $20 bill when you get 9/11. And that's just one of the bills. There are several like this. And I think it's perfectly explainable in the context of predictive programming and major transformative psychological operations like a 9/11. That thing is so deeply encoded into so much content. We should have seen it coming. We did see it coming subconsciously. The concurrent programming for 9/11, insane. You know, stuff like, and stuff that was immediately after that they had to retroactively alter, like collateral damage or the lone gunman, planes flying into the Twin Towers. Like, it was a recurring theme. But no, I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein is some kind of immortal. I think it's funny that people make that connection. But it is true that if you put somebody's face next to somebody else's face and you splice them, it's not hard to imagine it. You know, I put Jim Carrey's face mashed up against Erica Kirk, and I was like, yeah, close. Maybe not a perfect hit, but pretty close. By the way, facial blindness, thinking people have been replaced, these are all symptomatic of schizophrenic psychosis. And I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the conspiracy theories out there make you diagnosable. Why do you think that is? Well, these are engineered narratives designed to make you look crazy so that you're piled on by the mainstream at the behest of the controllers of media. And the effect that it has, and this is true in all cults, they don't capitulate to resistance or skepticism, but rather they double down. So the fact that the conspiracy theorists are reviled, impugned, and censored only makes them think that they're fighting the system. It actually eggs them on. But none of these conspiracy theories lead anywhere. They're not healthy. They only put you into the mind war polarization. Like Freedom Awaits. This guy is totally butthurt and triggered But the fact of it is, he came in here as a troll. He was using laughing emojis, acting like he was, I don't know, dropping the mic in some way with this little statement, like calling me pro-vax. It's like I don't give a fuck vax. Like, I'm not even in the conversation. I'm not anti-vax. I'm not pro-vax. I'm non. I don't drink Pepsi or any carbonated drinks. Am I anti-carbonated drinks? No. I just don't drink them. I'm a non-Pepsi user. I'm not anti-Pepsi. So the fact that I'm not lockstep, robotic, propaganda spewing anti-vaxxer doesn't mean that I'm therefore pro-vax. And if that's your assessment, that anybody who's not against what I'm against is for it, then you're not thinking. You're a reactive, programmed cult member. And anti-vaxxers are cult members. And it's all about blood purity and borders. Jameer May says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fake is the Iran conflict? It's engineered, provocateur. It's political theater. And most of the videos that I've seen have been flight simulators. It's a political stunt. It's a PR stunt with fireworks. It doesn't get any more complicated than that. And I'm saying this based on what we understand about media and what I've seen. If you find evidence that there's more to it than that, I'm all ears. Please share it. But if your operating presumption, and this goes for anybody, is that it's real until proven fake, you're basically a stooge. You're controlled. You're controlled up to your own best interests. You're better off saying it's fake until proven real. Because I saw this plane flying around, dodging missiles and dropping bombs, and all these patriots in the chat were like, yeah, that's America. America, F yeah. And then General Flynn comes out and he's like, before you go to bed tonight, hit your knees and pray for these brave pilots. Well, then you find out it's a flight simulator. It's not even real. So most people who think it's real are basing it off of some movie in their head, Top Gun Maverick. And they're not basing it on anything that they actually know. So you can believe it's real, but it doesn't mean you know it's real. And I'm in the position of informed disbelief. Unless I have something that contradicts that, I'm going to go with big psyop, fake. Atropia. And I just watched Atropia. If you haven't seen it, it's about a 24/7 war simulation town in California that's designed to look like it's in Iraq. And it's full-time crisis actors, pyrotechnics. There's even animatronic villagers. It's 100% basically like what we talk about all the time. All the technology, the fake stuff, the media there, where they can manufacture and create the appearance of a war, of IEDs going off, of conflicts in the streets on a closed movie set. So people, like the other day, I blocked someone, a new subscriber. I blocked her because she said that her best friend's dog walker's dentist knows somebody who's 6 degrees separated from a 9/11 jumper. And I'm like, okay, you're lying. Obviously, that's a bit of a confabulation, to say, I know somebody who died at that event. But if I were to be in a serious conversation with her, I would ask, well, where? Were they in a plane? Because the planes are fake. Were they in the towers? What makes you think anybody died in the towers? Because obviously the reason why is people think because what they're told that this thing would have been full, there would have been all these people in it. But what people aren't commonly appraised of is the fact that on September 11th, there were something like 88 drills. The National Reconnaissance Office, all these drills for terrorist attacks, just like what happened. There were people saying, oh, we were drilling for the same thing, and then it became real. No, the drill did not become real. The drill was portrayed as real to the news, but it never actually became live. It wasn't just this massive coincidence. But what this means is that if you have that many simulations going on, that many closed movie sets, you can rule out random people in a building that was already scheduled to be demolished. So you have a controlled demolition with the PSYOP attached. you had enough drills going on to create a completely closed off movie set. On a scale of 1 to 10, how real do you think the Iran conflict is? So something else to consider too. All these various governments, they all have a space program, and they all believe, or rather, their media all reinstates the same lies. Now, their opinions vary. There's an internal diversity of opinion, but they agree upon the facts as presented. So we all live in the same simulation. Do you think these other governments are actually like against us, like Iran? Are they against the great Satan in the West? Are these governments actually like, oh, we should do something about this other government, this other country? No, these are lowercase g governments. They all adhere to the same mind control. They're all part of the big psyops. So as far as I'm concerned, there's only one government. So these conflicts, it's like in 1984. The opening lines, let's see, pull that up. Eurasia and East Asia. Here it is. Oceania has always been at war with Eurasia. Therefore, Oceania has always been at war with Eurasia. Okay, this is the one. Anyway, in 1984, Oceania is constantly shifting alliances with either Eurasia or East Asia, but the party will say, we've always been at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with East Asia. It's like the Mandela effect. It's always been this way. So whatever their particular war is at that day, it's always been that way, even though it's always shifting. But given that we do have a global Orwellian soft totalitarianism, I mean, it's not like as bad as 1984. It already exists. So when we talk about these conflicts, you have to keep that in mind. Are these real conflicts? Like, did America fake the moon landing to trick the Russians? Well, the Russians were also faking space. So in other words, these governments are faking these events to trick the masses on both sides. Yeah, good point there, Lean Dion, about London's bombings and the drills. That's one of the best ones, actually. So you have the London bombings. You have 2 tunnels where bombs go off, kind of like Twin Towers. In fact, there was that movie with Robert De Niro called 0 Day that had 2 subway tunnels attacked at the same time. But with the London 7/7 thing, there was a BBC special on about how terrorists could attack the subways. Then you have the subways get attacked in these 2 tunnels. Well, at the same time that these 2 tunnels were bombed by terrorists, guess what? There's a drill going on. The drill was for the tunnels being bombed. And guess where the drills were taking place? Exactly where the bombers hit. So one of the big hoax indicators, in addition to predictive and concurrent programming, are concurrent drills. If there's a drill for something like the event that happens at the same time, it tells you this is where they put the assets into place. This is where they create the closed movie sets. This is where they bring in the personnel. HG says, with this Iran thing, are we looking at some deep fakes? Look, I don't immediately assume anything is AI or deep fakes. You know, I mean, it could just be because if you've been in the military, what do you do all the time? Drills. That's all you do is drills. When I was NBC NCO for my unit, we did drills for depleted uranium, where out in the field, we would have to set up certain vehicles and we'd have these pasted on, like basically showing where the depleted uranium's hit, so that when the soldiers walking by see it, they can react as though it's potentially radioactive. It's all drills, and that's all they do. It's just rehearsal. So what's the difference between a drill and a psyop? Nothing. A drill that's filmed as though it's real and given to the news becomes a fake event, a simulation turned real. But I kind of de-emphasize the significance of AI in this whole thing because they've been using, I mean, we could talk about AI all day, but the fact of it is, at these mass casualty simulations, they use squibs. You know, I saw this squib where it was like a sleeve you put on your arm, and it's got a wound on it, and it can bleed, and they have to stop the bleeding with a tourniquet. Capture the Loop says it's impossible to know anymore. I disagree. Because the instant you say it's impossible to know, you're essentially capitulating to the mind war, that you can't have certainty. And it's like, no, I have certainty. I know that this is fake. I know enough to know that this can't be real. So what we're talking about is like, I know it's a simulation. That's knowledge. It's not like I believe it's real or I'm not sure if it's real. No, I know it's a fake event. So it's about properly identifying what we're looking at. You know, Confucius says, the beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. So all we have to do is label it correctly. I'm not confused. I hear confusion in some people, and I'm like, there's no reason to be like ambiguous. Like, well, maybe Charlie's dead, maybe he's not. I don't know. What do I know? I'm just a little peon news consumer. It's like, no, you don't need to capitulate to the mind war and give in to the nihilism and the futility. They want you to think it's futile, so you rely on experts to tell you what to think. You can be intellectually independent and say, I don't believe it because of A, B, C, and D. Informed disbelief is a defensible position. It's far more defensible than low info belief or ambiguity and confusion. There's no reason to be confused. Skepticism isn't about confusion. It's about suspending judgment until you get more facts. And if you don't get more facts and the facts don't support it, you're like, well, as a skeptic, I just can't go along with it. I recognize that something happened, but I don't think it's as advertised. I saw some narrative that Trump went after Iran because they were threatening to take him out. Ryan Routh, remember him? God, we got to go back and revisit this neck stuff. Remember Ryan Routh tried to stab himself in the neck with a pencil, exactly where Charlie Kirk stabbed himself, or got himself shot, the same spot. And there's a drawing of Ryan Routh trying to poke himself in the neck. But this idea that Trump's retaliating for that, this is WWE level kayfabe. But look, I'm all ears to evidence. You know, someone's like, hey, you say these school shootings are all fake, but this one is real. Well, tell me which one. I'll look into it. Do you remember the school shootings that weren't? NPR, they investigated one of the more violent school years. It was like 2015 and 2016. And they're like, oh, look, there's 350 mass shootings events that happened this year. Let's investigate. And they called school after school, and they found that hundreds of school shootings that were reported weren't school shootings. These were incidents. Somebody brought a knife to school, or somebody mislabeled something. They weren't able to find, out of these hundreds of reported school shootings, any that were actually real. But the numbers were being inflated, probably by design. So they did some accidental journalism by fact checking. They accidentally auto-hoaxed a whole year of fake events. And had they not done that, politicians would be able to bounce off that. Well, last year we had 300 mass shootings. Let's get rid of guns. It makes me wonder how many other fake things went beneath the radar that weren't fact checked. That's why I'm doing this history of news bending, 1963 to 2026. That project is so that we can have this timeline of fakery, an encyclopedia of likely hoaxed events going back, so we can properly establish a frame of reference for the off-world stage perspective. When people jump on board, they can look at this and see, this is our assertion, this is real, and this is fake. Two separate timelines. I'll put a link there if you want to pick up a copy of the PDF. It's a work in progress. I'm doing updates now, but The whole point of it is that we need something akin to a Wikipedia, but only of fake events, simulated events. So what I did is I created a form. It's the PSYOP breakdown form. So it has synopsis, date, event, programming, concerted messaging, any drills or concurrent programming, hoax indicators, metascriptors, etc. So I made this chart essentially to break down every fake event. And this is 1963 to 2026. And what I'm going to do after this section is completed or fleshed out a bit more is I'm going to follow it up with another set of breakdowns of fake people that populated these events. All of the crisis actors, all of the participants in the fakery, the agencies, the metascriptors, the writers, like the directors. The Tom Clancy's been big. I mean, Tom Clancy did not live long enough to see how influential his work has been in all these fake events. Yeah, please give this stream a like or a dislike. Either one is okay. I'm pretty sure the anti-vaxxer is going to give me a dislike to show me. It's like Fafo, bro. There's your thumbs down. Like, I don't care. I will kick anybody out if they're advocating for alt media causes. If you're an activist, you should go do some activism. Imagine, proselytizing stale, outworn propaganda for no money. Not that making money makes it okay, but I'm just saying there are people who get paid good money to help fake the news, fake events, lie to the public, and you got people doing it for free. And granted, they have good intentions, but who said it? Good intentions? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Who said that? All right, we'll be back tomorrow. Open phones. Oh, this is Saint Bernard. That's the origin of it. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay. Saint Bernard. Fascinating. We live in the information age, and it's not always accurate. You have to use discernment, but there's even less of an excuse to be a non-skeptical news consumer. There's no reason to be dependent on a single source to tell you what to think. There's no reason not to be a skeptic. Yeah, Hank G says, what about the recent shooting in Austin where the assailant was wearing a shirt that said Islamic terrorist? I know, I think that's hilarious, like property of Allah. It's like so ham-fisted that you can't possibly miss it because, as I said before, there aren't any instances where these news agencies are just trying to simply inform you with these events. They're trying to conform you. They're telling you a story. And to make sure that you get the right story, they either A, have to provide you with a manifesto, or they have to make it super obvious. And in this case, well, let's see. For the last few years, it was like they write on their guns, like racial slurs, Nazi slogans with like white out. So one thing they've been doing since Christchurch is they write their manifestos on their guns, or they publish a manifesto, or in the case of this latest one, they wear their role on their shirt. That's absolutely hilarious. They released a follow-up video with a cop is a hero and he shoots the guy. First-person shooter. Looks real, sounds real, very dramatic, but I don't think any of it's real. And if you look at the context of it, this is the exact type of psyop that you would expect to follow Trump going after Iran as we get close to the midterms, after the ICE fiasco, and then you say, oh, this guy's an immigrant. So the political utility of this particular event, its obviousness, the ham-fisted way that they just presented it just says all over it, drill, fake. Nobody died, nobody cried. And the CPR they were doing on the people on the floor in the billiards room looked hokey. And then you had the billiards table with like drop cloths over them. So I'm like, okay, so the bar owner was like, sure, you can run a PSYOP drill here, but just don't get any theatrical blood on my pool tables. I came up with the term Scooby-Doo justice because I remember as a kid, you see this cartoon, Scooby-Doo, where the villain shows up in a mask, a costume. There's a mystery. And then by the end of the episode, they pull the mask off. And then the police are like, thanks, kids. And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for these kids. Every single episode. And I'm like, wait, this is exactly what we see with these PSYOPs. The event happens, the bad guy comes out, and before the end of the news segment, we know who did it, why, manifesto, and he's got the death penalty. And we're never going to hear from him again. Or he takes his own life. So the story kind of ends, but we have all the facts. Like the ice rink shooter. You get the whole thing in one episode. And that's not how real life works. That's not how crimes are solved or investigated. When somebody gets shot, you don't go to the newspaper and find out every detail about the crime scene and what they were thinking in their manifestos. You don't get the whole thing in the first article in your newspaper. It takes time to be investigated. There's secrecy, there's privacy. They got to notify the next of kin. But when it comes to these mass shootings, you get the whole story just dumped on you all at once. Earlier, this was last year in the summer, there was a movie called Weapons, which correlated with the Annunciation school shooting. And one of the things I found interesting is the movie Weapons is about, it's basically a school shooting analogy or allegory, but it's narrated by a child. So a child's voice talking about all these kids disappearing from a classroom because the evil witch killed them. Then the Annunciation school shooting happens, and you have a satanic witch, Nazi, redhead villain that they introduced to shoot up the Christian school. Well, that event was portrayed through the media, as this Christian school shooting by a Satanist. And guess what they brought out? Child crisis actors. So they had little kids narrating the story. So you hear about the shooting from a child talking about how his best friend died protecting him. And I'm thinking, why are you interviewing a child witness of a massacre and putting him on TV with all these adults around, recording him with their smartphones, fawning over him like it's some great performance? But I was just saying, it's unusual that a child witness to a murder would be on TV. That's a hoax indicator. But the fact that it was from a child's point of view perfectly correlated with the movie that had many overlaps with that event. Again, the movie was Weapons. The shooting was the Annunciation school shooting. And there are also connections between Weapons, the Annunciation shooting, and the Charlie Kirk event, which we'll get into. And one of the best pieces of predictive programming for the Charlie Kirk event, South Park. A lot of people said, I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was until I saw it on South Park. Well, if you go back and you watch that South Park episode, the Charlie Kirk character is knocked off his stool to the left. Where did Charlie fall after the squid sprayed theatrical blood on the floor? He fell down to his left. Capture the Loop says, on TV, the police are sexy and competent. Yeah, and the FBI agents solve crimes and they're fighting these villains. As far as I can tell, in real life, the FBI is just some big warehouse full of filing cabinets, and they just take reports and they file them, and that's it. And they never see the light of day. I've had nothing but this exact experience with the FBI for about 8 years now. I even did a FOIA request on myself to get all of the FBI reports that I filed since 2018 versus my stalker. And I got them all on a CD. Jamarian May says you should make a movie database of all these films and connect the different psyops and relate them. Call it the IPMDB. Well, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because as I mentioned that great deconstruction project, I'll put a link there. By systematizing all of our findings with the movies and their directors that relate to psyops, as we make these connections, I'm putting them in these documents. Then I copy and paste these documents and I put it into Notebook LLM. And I'm like, provide me a comprehensive chart showing patterns between the directors, themes of their movies, and associated psyops. And it will break down the information any way you want it to. And we could certainly, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're creating a database of all the fakery, but a usable database where we can extrapolate more information from it. We can really demonstrate the internal consistency of this, because this is a model. Psyops are a feature, not a bug. The fakery is systemic, and the entrainment between entertainment and fake events is built into this thing. It's part of the infrastructure. It's the model that they use, and it's always been this way as far back as we look. I mean, this is, at this point, this is the next stage. We got to get all of our information together so we can leverage the power of AI to systematize it, draw better conclusions, or bring out new connections we may not have noticed. But what we're doing here is we're setting the foundation for a skeptical branch of media outside of the controlled duopoly. And now that we have this foundation and we're building off of it, I think it's important to start kicking people out of our conversation if they're still part of the old paradigm. And it's okay to even be sort of blunt about it. And the reason why is that in order to have this separate entity, we have to make sure the difference is distinct. There's already a chasm. There is a difference. They're on the other side of the screen, but we need to make it obvious. So what we need is their reaction. So you have these controlled opposition, useful idiots getting mad at the off-world stage perspective. Yeah, turn up the volume, get madder. Come at me, bro. Because the more of them that get mad, the more of a market distinction we can create here. Because this is a marketplace of ideas, and theirs is a closed system. And we want to make that connection that we are not the same. We are not the same as the alt media whatsoever. But in order to make that distinction, we got to burn bridges, and we have to trigger the other side so that they distance themselves from us. Because at the end of the day, we are correct. We have the facts on our side. We've deconstructed many of these fake events over time, but we've revealed the structure of media, government media, what it actually is. And this perspective is the only open-minded perspective, because the other perspectives are closed against the very things that would expose their fakery. Anyway, I look forward to this project evolving. I want to say thanks to all of you who've supported the channel. We have a very good focus at this point. And my next objective here, of course, is getting this foundation expanded so it can grow and get more people involved who could help. Crowdsourcing, outsourcing, whatever it takes. As we get this foundation laid, it's going to expand as more people contribute. And this information is useful. And we can put it into charts, into models, into mind maps. AI is just perfect right now for what we're doing. And if you want to know more about my process, if you get that PDF, I explain the idea behind it. And I'm going to release part 2 in a few days. A few days after that, part 3. And after that, I think we're ready to take this thing to the world stage. The off-world stage needs to invade the world stage, like a mind virus. Maybe on 311, I was talking to someone behind the scenes about this. I was like, if I can get this great deconstruction project rolling, maybe we can start invading the world stage on 311, on the anniversary of COVID. The auto hoax mind virus. It's been in this laboratory the whole time. We'll just leave it in a few inconspicuous bowls of bat soup. Just leave it out there in the world and let it do its work. Because that's ultimately what I mean when I say it's a mind virus, is that it should be able to spread on its own. It should be able to replicate in other carriers. And the simpler I make it, the more coherent the explanations, the more concise, the more transmissible this is. And I still feel like this is unco-optable because it goes so outside of the purview of your controlled op agents. And every attempt that they make to take over this space is only going to reveal that there is an audience for people who want to get all the way out of this propaganda matrix. Because the people going to these big channels who are suggesting that Charlie Kirk's not dead, for example, yeah, that's an indicator of how many people there are who are willing to entertain this idea. They just haven't been exposed to systemic fakery at scale. And that's because, again, no one has consolidated this like we have. All right, I'll see you all in Discord, and tomorrow, hopefully I'll have a 1-800 number. But we'll continue this conversation in Discord. Thanks for all of your comments. Have a great evening. It's already 2 in the morning here. Oh, by the way, daylight savings. So it might even be later. Right? What does it mean? Spring forward. So what time is it now? Let me double check that. What time does it change? Okay, at 2 a.m. local time, we change it. All right, good. Guess we're going to lose an hour of sleep. And by the way, there's a new members video. It's sort of a rough draft. I'm preparing a series of whiteboard-based topics or conversations to present these topics to noobs, especially when I promote the book. So I'm uploading some of my rough drafts under the members section. So if you have a blue shield, you can check out the latest one. Jamarin May says the change already happened. So we already time traveled. We've already glitched. Excellent. We're going to lose sleep over this.